host, Lev Polyakov. It is a great pleasure to be here today to talk about the based question, which is the most important question, more important than Russia, more important than whatever else is going on in the world. I think this is a very interesting opportunity to have representatives of the online, esoteric, I'm not really sure what to call it, the very online crowd, which would be the Prudentialist to my bottom over here wearing a crown like the king that he is, as well as the wonderful Hannah Cox, who is a co-host of the new Based podcast, and this is considered by a friend of yours, Prudentialist Orrin McIntyre, to be an example of cultural appropriation. And of course, we have the great Remso, and we have for the first time joining us, not on the Twitter thing, but live for real, we have Grayson Quay joining us. So thank you very much for coming in. Gio, where are you? Come in. Anyway, that's all I have to say about Gio. Get Gio in here. That's all I got to say. So anyway, cultural appropriation. Let's start with Hannah, actually, to talk about, first of all, who you are, how you got here, and why it is that you chose Based, and then we're going to get to the cultural appropriation question from Prudentialist.
Sounds good. Well, my name's Hannah Cox. I'll try to sum up my background quickly, but I've had kind of a weird career. I started off working in music in Nashville for some time, stumbled into politics, doing some work for a Second Amendment group on the ground there, and ended up really falling in love with it, and decided to change my career. So I jumped into politics full-time in 2016, started working for a free market think tank in Tennessee, where I was instrumental in passing lots of public policy, everything from ending the final income tax in the state to overturning healthcare regulations like certificate of need to passing school choice programs, criminal justice reforms that really span the gap. We also had a pro bono litigation group within the organization that I was also influential with. We would sue over things like private property rights. So I really got like this great early education in a lot of different public policies and legal issues. After about 2.5 years from there, I went to run a group called Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. And I was their national manager for almost 3 years, during which time I helped overturn the death penalty in a state each year. And then during COVID, I was off the road. I wasn't traveling or lobbying as much, so I had a lot of time on my hands. And I started writing a lot more, started doing a lot more online. My platforms really kind of took off. And after a few months, I decided to launch a concept that I'd actually had in mind since 2016, which was my initial podcast called Based. And the premise of Based was built upon something I noticed working out in the field, as you can tell from the public policies I worked on. I often was working with like both the far left and the far right. And as a libertarian, I was kind of in the middle. And I started realizing that they weren't so far apart as they thought. A lot of times people actually agreed on many of the major issues we were facing. They just had very, very different solutions to those problems. And oftentimes it was because they didn't really understand the public policy or legal issues that created them in the first place. And if you don't understand what creates a problem in the first place, of course, you're going to then probably prescribe bad solutions, oftentimes prescribe bad big government solutions that are what created those issues initially. So I wanted to launch Based as a place for people to come together and be able to kind of look back at the public policy history of major issues, and also acquire the ability to do that, right? To kind of learn how to think about these things and not be told what to think by me or anybody else, but really learn how to research, how to like trace the steps back of bad policies out there and get to the root of them. So that was the initial concept. It took off quite quickly. It ended up in the top 10% of podcasts within its first couple of episodes. I named it Based for 3 reasons. One, I had seen the term based used on Twitter a lot to refer to things that were like upfront, truthful, speaking truth to power, saying like what things were, even if it wasn't popular or even if it wasn't like following the political narrative, kind of like not politically correct. And I thought that was a great terminology. I'm pretty blunt, pretty straightforward. And then also the show itself is supposed to be looking for the root, the base cause of problems. And last,
I don't know what's going on.
Shit, they got her.
They got her. Well, while they got her, I want to go to Prudentialist and Gio, that you are back with your beautiful black fez.
I was here the very beginning, but he didn't look at the chat.
I looked at the messages, spiritually, because I was looking at the messages beforehand, couple of minutes. No Gio.
Anyways, another fine episode, by the way. Hail to the truckers. Tomorrow they're going to Ottawa and hail Putler to his future victory against the evil American Empire. We're going to win this one, Lev. We're going to win. Heil Putler! Heil Putler!
You're being played for a sucker, Geo, but I love you nonetheless. But no, this is something that I want to get into with the truckers at least.
Well,
Hannah, some base ground, some ground that we could all agree on. Hannah, a quick blurb about the truckers, and then we're going to get to Prudentialist. Just like a quick yes or no, do you support the truckers or don't you support the truckers?
Sorry, I just got back in. I don't know what you're talking about.
The Canadian truckers, the ones that are riding right now in Canada against the policies that are being enacted there.
I'm not following, so I can't weigh in.
No problem. Let's go to Prudentialist, and let's talk about the cultural appropriation of base. So you heard what Hannah had to say.
I love how I'm already being put in as sort of this anti-position, despite the fact that I think there's plenty of room for nuance. Appreciate it, Lev.
All right, then Gio's going to be the anti-position. You're going to be the voice of reason between the two sides, and I'm just going to chill here.
I don't know. I just think, never mind. Don't worry about it. Go ahead, my friend. Oh.
Well, I think the issue that primarily comes up, of course, is that I think, as Mr. Quay had pointed out when he was talking to Polumbo about online pushback, of course, that was going to happen, right? The internet is a wonderful place where people can have a wonderful feedback loop for what they want to say. And I took the time to actually read Hannah's article about why they're founding it and what they're doing, which, of course, had nothing necessarily to do with the pushback. I think it has to do a lot with the word. Which, of course, is, I think, in its evolution changed a lot from maybe when it was used in 2015, 2016, which is always funny to read the sort of the origins from it and its slight reference to freebasing. But I think that it also has a lot to do with the fact that many people, whether it's online or work in actual politics, I work in local regional politics where I am in Texas. I won't disclose where. But I mean, there's always frustrations, right? And it's very easy when words aren't always with a clear set definition that can provide reasons to get up in arms. And so the quip about cultural appropriation, as Twitter personality Oren McIntyre put it, is kind of funny because there's always the people want to have labels that they assign to themselves. So it's somewhat of a fight for territory, but also I think an ideological one.
Well, how would you also define what based is? Hannah defined it. How would you define it differently, if you do define it differently?
Well, I would just add to her definition that it is upfront, blunt, oftentimes crass, but usually in the face of sort of that friend-enemy distinction. I think the right uses it as a plain Jane, simple way to just say, these are the things that I want to do. I kind of play the game of friend-enemy distinction, and this is what I would like to see accomplished. And I think that's why you can get based being used from everything from free market, libertarian-oriented solutions to people saying that, like, listen, the real issues with the NGOs and things that have to be done about them. So it's anywhere from people like Ron Paul to more maybe state power oriented candidates like J.D. Vance, having their audiences say what they're saying is based.
And Gio, do you differ from that opinion about the word base, what it means? Because now you're saying that we can't use the word based anymore within your circle.
No, it's done. It's cringe. It's over. When a meme dies, let the dead bury the dead, as they say. I actually was binging Grayson Quay's articles. I think very fine writer, and maybe one day I shall grace my presence on The Spectator. Well, my friend Ben Sixsmith already writes for them, so I think that the problem is that when you have this weird appropriation of a particular American Creole, I think people realize that it started off as like this ironic 4chan meme, like a lot of things back in the day where they would appropriate like eubonics and various what people I guess nowadays refer to as like Black Twitter memes. Like the big one I remember way back, this is like ancient history, was like the 350 thing. That was like, ugh. But I think the problem is that when you come to the realization that these things ultimately do have a life cycle, even just like talking about it or debating about it in the terms of, oh, this is a major significant, like, let's call it signifier in terms of mimetic language. And it's like, this is a serious issue. And to a degree, I extent, like, memes matter. But I think like even just framing something like internet lingo such as based around like, well, there's a debate to be had and who owns it. It's like, I think it kind of violates the spirit of the meme enough. It's like we're already sort of beating the dead horse. And I don't know if but then again, I'm giving away the kayfabe of the show, because of course there has to, the content must flow. But I do think that Prudentialist is 100% right. I think that the problem is when you spread ideas through mimetics themselves on any side of the political spectrum, you're inevitably going to wedge yourself to the life cycle of those memes in general. And the problem, especially with the online right, is that we're very good at the generative aspect of it, but when it comes to the appropriations or ironic appropriations of something, to go beyond that framework is sort of like the biggest, I would say, alchemical stone on the internet. How do you cross over ironic meme culture into a form of sincerity, which is something that I've been writing about since like 2016, and I still don't have an answer. So,
and I would love for Hannah to respond, as well as Remso and Grayson. But before that, I also wanted to give my own output about what I think is going on here, the reason why I decided to do this. It's not even so much for the word based as it is for the need that I think a lot of people, especially like a lot of people online, have. And when they see based being used for something new, something that's not really within their particular sphere, they may get a little bit nervous about, well, not nervous, but they may find it to be a little bit cringe for them because, it's their word, it has to do with their particular culture. And I think that the reason why this kind of culture, while it's still changing and evolving, is an important one, is the whole phrase of man cannot live by bread alone. Where when we're talking about something like economics, which for me as an expat from the former USSR, in fact, I was born when it was still the USSR, Hannah, I am very much in favor of capitalism, free markets, all that good stuff. But the problem that I'm noticing is that when that is just the thing that is associated with based, if we're talking about, fighting against communism, which I'm in favor for, I don't know if that's going to be enough of an answer for a generation that didn't really have that many people to look up towards as far as what is the telos? What is the end goal here for us, for people like beyond just having freedom and having the ability to buy goods at a low price? So that is just my thing that I wanted to add in here, where I think the frustration is coming from. And I'm curious, Hannah, what thoughts you have on this?
Yeah, so I will add, I don't know where I got cut off in explaining why I named it base, but I was going to finish by saying my knowledge of its usage by what I would term the alt-right or nationalists was zilch, because I don't follow the alt-right or nationalist. I'm not in those communities. And so by the time that I even saw it and became familiar with the terminology, it had already become something that was being used more in like libertarian circles, I would say. But even then, when I take it off of Twitter, I have other large audiences on places like Facebook, which are typically much less online people, tend to be much older, more grassroots. They still to this day are like, what is base? Like I have to typically define it at least 3 to 5 times a day because they don't know. So it was not a mainstream term. I do think my usage of it has made it a bit more mainstream. But the reason I used it was because I intended fully to imprint my own ideology on it, which does incorporate free market capitalism. I do call myself a rabid capitalist. I think it's done more to eliminate poverty and generate wealth throughout history than any other system we've seen devised. But I'm certainly not somebody who cares just about that, or even I would say the most about that. My prominent thing in politics has always been what I would term civil liberties. Like I said, I started off working on Second Amendment issues. I then went to criminal justice issues. I care a lot about free speech. I care a lot about human rights. And so that is the thing that I think I actually tend to focus on a bit more in my work. And if people follow me, they know that. And then lastly, I'll add that for me, what's more important than even sticking up for a certain system, because I kind of feel this way about like when people call themselves libertarians and I see them being anti-immigrant or pro-cop, I'm like, oh, they're not a libertarian. Like, why are you saying that? Right? Like
Liberty hangout.
Yeah, like things get co-opted. So I understand that feeling.
No, that truly is a based account, though, in my opinion.
But for me, I think it's more important to highlight how problematic both sides are, both parties, how much corruption's being done to people. And I think that's actually where people should come together. I'm not very much interested in fighting turf wars with it, be it people who call themselves libertarians, I don't think are libertarians, or be it nationalists. I think the real enemy is the government. And I think that if people quit wasting their time with these kinds of things online, maybe we could go after the real enemy.
Well, just to be clear, what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about based, who are the people that you're saying beyond the new people that you've introduced the term to? Who do you define the people who had that term originally, until you used it as being?
Yeah, so it came to my knowledge that this was something that the alt-right considered to be their word after the show blew up. And it only really came to my knowledge because I started getting a lot of like anti-Semitic comments, which was weird because I'm not even Jewish. So I was getting a lot of anti-Semitic comments, a lot of like anti-female comments. And it was always from these like, you could just tell sort of disaffected accounts, didn't have real names, didn't really have faces. And, thanks for the ad revenue, baby. Like, you're increasing my algorithm. But that was how I first became aware this was something that sort of crowd even considered to be theirs. So that's really my only knowledge of it to this day, or the people who leave nasty comments.
So you would only define that crowd as being alt-right and nothing more?
I guess by alt-right, I am encompassing things like white nationalists. I'm encompassing things like, I think maybe there is some mainstream nationalism within it, but in my experience with that community, no, they tend to be very far right.
Can I respond?
Yes, please respond. Although I would,
I wanted Grayson,
okay,
then
yes.
Remso didn't get. Oh, he's.
Oh no, he's gonna be back. Don't worry.
So, Grayson, what do you think of this? And then, then Prudentialist. I think Prudentialist has a lot of thoughts on that one. So,
I have a lot of thoughts too. Yeah. So. One thing I just wanted to say in response to what Hannah was saying is that I've actually kind of stopped using the term alt-right just because it's I think stopped being useful. Because I do think it means everything from like, well, I don't agree with the mainstream right, the dead consensus of the last decade or so. So, it can, like, we've gotten to the point where alt-right can mean everything from like, I don't really like George W. Bush and Mitt Romney to like, I'm an ethno-nationalist and I want to kill the Jews or whatever. So,
this is YouTube. We got to be careful with the AI.
Shouldn't say that.
Sorry about that one.
Sorry.
Let's just say name them. That could be a good.
Oh God.
I said I did.
No, but it is funny though. Like even things like that, even the most anti-Semitic things that I would get, and I'm Jewish, by the way. Matrilineally, I'm Jewish. I think a lot of the anti-Semitic things that I get on the regular, these are not from whoever I would term as the official members of the alt-right. A lot of it is young kids who are very online, who don't have a lot of good role models in life. So they do something. Hold on, no, this is not an insult. This is not an insult. They would do what any young prank oriented generation would do, Hannah. They are doing what the hippies would have done in the 60s. They're doing what a lot of these countercultural movements would have done. No, really, because
we're the real punk.
They have to have somewhere to vent, and a lot of this, let's face it, it is going to be these edgy memes. It's going to be a lot of sneeding, a lot of feeding. Speaking of which, please sneed the super chats. But
by the way, Remzo's back.
Yes. But Gio, go for it. Let me know what you think.
Wait, Grayson didn't finish though.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I think what Lev's saying is really accurate. That based does have this connotation of being very in your face and very brash and sometimes very crass, right? It's as was mentioned before, it has this origin point in freebasing. So originally, like saying someone was based meant they were acting like they were high on cocaine, just that they were acting very erratic and crazy and aggressive. And, that can be like, you're crazy. It can be dismissive, or it can be like, man, you're crazy. Like, wow, like, almost like admiration, like you don't care what anybody thinks about you. And I think that there is this desire to be contrarian for its own sake that can eventually lead you to some very dark places where you're like, Mussolini was good, actually. And it's like,
well, he was good, actually. That's not a debate. Wow. I think the problem... The problem is, okay, do you know there's some certain bread tubers, and they'll never come on the show, by the way. We've tried. It never works. There's that one guy, what's his name? Innuendo something, who had this video about basically started the meme of the radicalization pipeline, right? The problem is that their claim is that if you use ironic memes like Based or Giga Chad or Gamerhead Yes, which are all derivative of the same sentiment that Grayson was outlining, then that's going to lead you to becoming like a reading James Mason Siege or whatever. I think like the problem is that you have, in terms of the genealogy of like the alt-right, quote unquote, which I think is largely a dead movement, is that you have like the ideas certainly have diffused to the broader right wing in general, to the point where even like the most mainstream of figures, even if it's, let's face it, even if it's just Tucker Carlson, will talk about things like, well, maybe, if European civilization is like demographically replaced, maybe that's a bad idea. So, but when it comes to the alt-right proper, a lot of these accounts, they've sort of like cloistered themselves into like their own little fan base, and they still have like some legitimacy among themselves. And there's still like sort of kind of events around like the One Millennial Woes thing is still like relevant. But by and large, these movements have themselves bifurcated into different factions. But the thing is that when it comes to Based is that, or any meme of this caliber, it tends to be shared among everybody. And for example, like Hannah here is saying, I'm going to graft my own ideology on it. But I think everyone grafts their own ideology onto meme culture, even if it's just like some leftoid on Twitter using like the Gamerhead Yes, even though it's like totally bereft of context, and putting a wall of text on it, of course, which I mean, we could get into why there's the wall of text. But I do think that it is interesting when you start to like pull back and analyze, okay, how did this become a thing? Like, for example, I'm old enough to remember when like cuck was a big thing. Now nobody uses that term because it's like become so like Facebook boomer conservative that it ceases to have any relevance. And maybe in the future there will be some other term of endearment towards contrarian ideas to the norm. I don't know. But anyways, who's next? Prudentialist, or I don't know.
It might be a good idea to get Hannah in as much
Yeah.
as we can. 'cause I know she
Yeah,
has a
exactly.
Yeah, she's short for time. Put her in.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I don't have a lot more to follow up from that. So.
Well, then I have a question for
Well,
Hannah,
yeah.
because okay, here's
about the libertarian thing.
well-
what do you think? Where do you think libertarianism, from your definition, stands politically, though? Because I think the problem is that, especially among, like, I would say the blue check class, they still think that a lot of like capitalist, well,
hey,
not
you're an
Clay,
all-star.
you're one of the good ones. So they still have this. There's still this pervasive belief that libertarianism is like part of the right. But I think, having been a libertarian a long time ago, I think that there was this massive split between like the Ron Paul people going to the alt-right and like libertarianism becoming something else. Like there's a lot of right-wing critiques of capitalism nowadays, is what I'm saying. So how would you view yourself? Do you view yourself on the right or as something entirely different than like the monolithic right and left?
Yeah, so I come from the right. I was raised Republican. I'm a pastor's kid. I'm from the Deep South. So like I don't know. It's hard for me to verbalize because I really dislike where the right is going, but I still do identify, if I had to like go one direction, I would say I'm a right-leaning libertarian, which is funny because online sometimes I get pegged as a left-leaning libertarian, other times it's right. Like, you're truly in the middle when people can't even decide which kind of libertarian you are, I guess. And I think libertarianism is fractured. I don't think that I don't think it's a cohesive movement right now. I think you really do see one side that's kind of trying to be Republican light, sort of with the Mises caucus. And then I think you have kind of the left, which is somewhat the old guard, the think tank world that, especially during COVID, I don't think has been particularly consistent on civil liberties and on private property rights, which would pertain to capitalism. So it's a hard place to be. For me, where I've ended up after a long time of actually getting public policies passed is intending to really focus on that, because that's where I think you get stuff done, is focusing on public policies, finding anybody you can who will come together on key issues and actually getting stuff done. Because I don't like either Democrat or Republican parties where they're at, but I'm under no illusions that if the Libertarian Party were to gain power, that it would become just as corrupted and would have just as many issues as the major two.
Well, with the right specifically, what issues do you have with them as far as where you see them going right now that you find troubling?
Oh, yeah. Well, the first thing, I mean, when I started working in politics, I immediately just realized Republicans were not who they said they were. I truly believed in limited government and individual liberty and free markets. And even before Trump, that was not something the GOP was actually voting for or standing for. So I always disagreed with where they were on things like our foreign policy, although that has gotten somewhat.
Yeah, well, the war hawks seem to be out, and the people who are more getting in are more of the populists. So,
more the populists,
do you have any problems with the way the populists are acting and the direction that they're headed?
I have a lot of issues. First and foremost, as Gio just said, they're turning against capitalism. Increasingly, they are just as big government in their ideology and in their solutions as the left. I see that they are also working against things like immigration, which I think are a net positive for economies and which I think are real civil liberty issues. I don't see them getting serious on things like policing, who are the people who are actually taking our rights and killing us in the streets. And I just don't really get anything from the GOP these days. I don't know what they're good for. They don't cut spending. They don't actually limit regulations. They don't uphold civil liberties. So to me, they're sort of the worst of both worlds at this point. I don't know who's asking for a political party that is both big government when it comes to economics and big government when it comes to how you live your life. No, thank you.
Well, with immigration, hold on, Gio. I gotta say something here. This is very important. So with immigration, myself being an immigrant, I think immigration is important. But what I always say on the stream is that I value immigration when it comes to people being of the same, if not higher, cultural level in terms of being able to assimilate to wherever they happen to be. That would be where I would draw the line in the sand here. I think the problem that a lot of people have just with the idea of immigration, just bring people in for the sake of the economy is, again, going back to the idea of telos, that Aristotelian idea of the inherent purpose and objective of a thing. If the inherent purpose is just to make money and just to have freedom, okay, so let's say we have money and we have freedom. What's next? What do we do with this money and what do we do with this freedom? Which is why I think culture is a very important thing, something that I think the more populistic elements have been focusing on. Of course, there's always extremes that, people can take with these things, but do you see how something like that is an important issue and is something that I think a lot of especially younger, very online people are concerned about, and why they're finding at least just pure libertarian free market talk to be very empty when it comes to that idea of the telos or Aristotelian final point?
I think there's been a lot of fear mongering, and I think that many people never meet those who are different than them and actually don't even know the immigrant communities they're talking about. I've gotten to spend a lot of time in them, and I think they do work hard to assimilate. And I think that there are things we could do to incentivize people who want to come here for the right reasons, who want to come here because they're fleeing dictatorships and socialism and all kinds of other evils, and who would work harder to uphold American values than many Americans that I see day to day, who are complacent and who are, take for granted what we have in this country. And so those are the people I'd like to focus on getting here. And while I am very, very pro-immigration and probably much more radical on that than other people on this call, I'm willing to compromise on these things. So if we can come together to find ways that we can increase immigration and that I think could create better assurances that we have the proper protocols for people to be able to assimilate and to uphold these values, I'm all in.
Let's see. Prudentialist, any thoughts there?
All right, guys, I do have to run. I have another.
All right, Hannah, thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, as you're leaving, I did want to thank you for coming and thank you for the work you're doing. We might have disagreements on big picture stuff, but I agree with you on a lot of the issues on the granular level.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate the conversation. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That's where I find myself being with a lot of libertarians. When people who I know who work for libertarian think tanks tell me the specific issues they're working on, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. As an all-encompassing ideology, though, I find it very, very lacking.
I think Prudentialist, you go ahead. But really quickly, I think that the perception that I have, maybe it's just because I'm in an echo chamber, but I notice that when it comes to average people, I think that the opposite is true. A lot of people want a socially conservative and I know it's like a stupid label, but fiscally liberal, whatever, left-wing order, whether it's populism or not. I think, as much as I hate him, as much as I beef on him, and I think I call him a gargoyle, but Richard Hanania actually did have a good article where he said that the problem is you have on the left, you have a small cabal of people who, because they serve elite interests, get massified. But on the right, you have libertarians who actually get policy stuff done more or less, as opposed to the greater right wing. But because they're a relatively smaller group, in my opinion, relative to the vast majority of people that would vote Republican, they sort of are promoted out hand because they serve a certain interest. Whereas like someone, if you have like an explicit, like whoever that is, DeSantis or whoever, I don't know, I'm on the fence with that, to say, yes, we need a fiscally liberal and socially conservative rearrangement of the GOP, I think that would be immensely popular. I mean, I'm Canadian. It's never going to work here in Canada. Canada, we're a lost nation, but non-nation, sorry.
Well, Canada is fiscally...
You have a lot of thoughts in this.
But Canada is fiscally liberal, though. Wouldn't you say that, Gio?
Canada, okay, you know what Canada is? Canada is if you would take Oregon and make it a country. That's what Canada is. It's basically the bluest of blue liberal Democrats, but because they hate America, but they love American Democrats, they have this like weird passive aggression towards America, where it's like, we hate America, we're not America, but if like, you know, if Biden or Bernie Sanders pats us on the head, then we love it, right? Because like, for example...
Can I jump in about Canada real quick?
And then I want to go to Remso.
This is why my theory is... This is why I have the theory that the show Letterkenny is a psyop. I love Letterkenny, but it's like set in this like rural area of Canada that would traditionally be like the most conservative part of the country. And they all have like, you know, like their way of like speaking and acting is like coded to be very like what you would associate with right-wing people, but you know, when you look at their actual like beliefs, they all like just toe the line completely with whatever the ideology is.
Is that show related to
Letterkenny for that? Can you give me an example of,
is it related to Kenny versus Spenny, by the way?
No. God no. Like Little Mosque on the Prairie was like that, but that was just like a diversity cheap pop. But so they're all like a bunch of libs on Letterkenny. Is that the whole deal?
They're like, well, you have to dig below the surface, but like, you know, yeah, just like anytime like a social issue comes up, they're all just kind of offhand, just like, oh yeah, of course, you know, like whatever the talking point is.
That is what Canada is. It's crushing.
Like even though you know they're all like, oh, you know, going to have some beers and you know, ride or snowmobiles and stuff, you know, like that. Like that's kind of their thing. They're like they're Canadian rednecks, you know, but they're totally like they've accepted the left's kind of cultural agenda completely.
Because anytime you have like the truck convoy thing, anytime you have like an explicitly somewhat to the right movement, it gets coded as like America. Like for example, they're already saying that, oh my God, tomorrow is going to be the 6 times a billion. All the trucks are going to explode or something. I don't know. That's the whole process, is because we have such a tightly controlled cultural and media apparatus that it's just the images of thought are so powerful in Canada that like it's unreal. Like Americans, they will never be able to relate to this.
By the way, look at this comment over here from Hopper. Lev looks like a young Trotsky. I don't know. I don't see it. Remso, do you see it?
I mean, Trotsky was a bad-looking guy, if we're gonna be honest.
Yeah, I mean, he got all those dames. He got that Mexican. What's her name? Yeah, Frida.
He had a nice train ride. It was all great.
Yeah. Nice train ride. All right, so I want to get to Remso about the Telos question that I asked Hannah. I don't think I got an answer to that particular question, and I'm curious, since you are the resident, although I'm half libertarian, but you are the more full-on libertarian than I am, let's say. So regarding the
hot dog with Bitcoin one time.
There we go. So regarding the teleological question here, I think this is the frustration of a lot of people, where they look at libertarianism and they would agree that, yeah, maybe it wouldn't be bad to have a open market and to have more freedom. You know, I don't want the government's boot on my neck, but at the same time, something's missing. Something's not quite right here. Is it all there is? You know, just this consumerism, and we see the degradation that's going on in certain parts of civilization just because we have the internet all the time and it's broadcast, but it seems to be getting worse in terms of people talking about things like degeneracy here and there. And what do you, Remso, think of that teleological question? And do you feel my frustration that some of these things are missing from a lot of the things that libertarians talk about? And maybe they shouldn't talk about them. Maybe it's not their particular forte. But do you see why that's a problem with some people accepting more libertarian policies when those things are not addressed at all?
You know, Lev, I think a lot of people are really stupid. And, you know, ever since I left Washington, D.C. to come here to Wisconsin, I didn't realize how much of an echo chamber I had been in. And it wasn't just an online echo chamber. I think largely it stayed the same. It follows you everywhere because it's just a representation of you. But it was a representation of people that were just severely disconnected from the general realpolitik. And I don't hear this being spoken a lot as much as I used to think I heard it. And that's very key right there. What do I think people are talking about versus what do I actually hear them talking about? And I think that was a big eye-opener moment. You know, I want to answer your question by kind of answering something different, which is the use of political labeling, because I'll be quite honest, I didn't quite know whether based was a label or whether based was an action. I was just very confused because nobody really knew what it was. And that's why I think there's strength in what Hannah's doing. She took something that's popular and she's going to take it for herself and she's going to rebrand it because she sees it as something that has strength to it. So she's like, I might as well take the power play and take it. I mean, how many, you know, like American greatness, America first, MAGA, let's go Brandon. I mean, these are all things that come and go with the tide. I mean, I remember, you know, when progressives used to call themselves liberals. Now they almost never call themselves that anymore. But I want to talk about four people real fast. I want to talk about Ed Crane, the Koch brothers, and Murray Rothbard, and I'll throw H.L. Mencken in there at the top. You know, H.L. Mencken was the first person to call himself a libertarian. And even as the broader liberty movement in the, you know, late 50s, around the, you know, to the mid 60s when the Goldwater era was happening, you know, they still, you know, these classical liberals, these Austrian economists and such, they were calling themselves libertarians, but only amongst each other because they realized it didn't quite matter to the world. So then when you have Ed Crane working with the Koch brothers and they're trying to make, you know, these libertine ideas try and, you know, mass appeal it to folks, that's where you see the first split with Murray Rothbard. Murray Rothbard is like, no, you're doing this all wrong. And ultimately, when you actually read the arguments and everything, it never had anything to do with a schism of ideology. It always had to come down to a schism of practice. And that's what formed the Mises Institute with Murray Rothbard. And libertarians have always kind of fallen into this. I wrote in my book, Stay Away from Libertarians, the libertarian schisms. It's this need to continually self-segregate. Well, you know, I'm an anarcho-syndicalist. I didn't even know what the hell that was. Everyone I knew who called themselves that was a jerk. So I was just like, I don't want anything to do with that. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. Well, you know, I'm a small L libertarian. I'm a big L libertarian. I'm a conservative libertarian. It got to the point where it's like, what I found, and I think this is a larger reflection of political movements, it's the people that care more about labels, the people that care more about like these political secular catechisms they put themselves through, the more they care about that, the less I realize that they actually impact the world. Because what I noticed was that when Charles Koch actually stopped caring about whether or not people were libertarian, he cared more about whether or not he was actually impacting legislation and laws through coalitioning and working with different people. That's when he realized, you know, if I care less about who I'm working with and what they believe, and I care more about issue per issue, how to get things done, this is how I'm going to do it. And I think, if anything, right now within the libertarian community, we transitioned from, you know, the argument over what is based, you know, some people were saying, well, it's just an excuse to be an asshole and everything, to what is now being considered post-libertarianism. And post-libertarianism is essentially this concept of the post-political moment. It's this idea that if the Ron Paul moment was really between 2008 to 2012, and that was the rebirth of the libertarian movement, then what we saw post 2016, I would say the real deciding point is 2020, not electorally wise, but because of what happened with the lockdowns of the pandemics and the crash of civil liberties and everything else. The post-libertarian moment got to the point where it's like, listen, we're not going to save the world, because I think, at least in my personal opinion, I don't think the natural state of man is one that seeks freedom anymore. I think man naturally seeks servitude and safety. So I don't think libertarianism is about saving the world at this point. I think, if anything, if you identify as a libertarian, the most you could do is save yourself.
But then the question is, once you save yourself, what happens then? And I'm not discounting. No, but I'm not discounting the saving of yourself as being something that's you know, some kind of a lower position. I'm saying that's a very important thing. But the question is, once you get your creature and comforts in check, not specifically you, Remso, but pretty much anybody, once they get their creature comforts in check, once they're in a pretty good situation, or once they do as much as they can to make sure they're in a good situation, the question is, then what? What is the reason for me to live? And I know it's a very deep
good
thing, but this is what I'm
yeah.
kind of grasping at with the word based. Because real quick, I just want to say that one other thing that I think we missed when talking about the word based is that it's also a euphemism for grounded. It's a euphemism for being grounded in something that's I'd say, like that whole quote about tradition isn't it the worship of ashes, preservation of fire, grounded in something that's bigger than you, something that makes you grow as a result of being a part of it. That is something that I see based as being, whether we're talking about following certain ancestral traditions, whether we're talking about reaching deeper into the heart of who you are and knowing thyself, as that whole philosophical term goes. I think that is something that could be, brought together with the word base. But what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you for that. But I think now we need to ask the big question, which is the people that are really, that they're at that point in their life, they care more about actual action because they have a network established and they know how to get things done, and they're not having conversations like this. Like, I've been in enough of the smoke-filled rooms during my days of as a political operative and everything to remember that they never had these discussions. I can genuinely tell you, I've never been around politicians in private situations where amongst each other, whether they were with their allies or their enemies, they ever had deep philosophical discussions over how they identified. That was always something for the public.
Maybe they do that at Bohemian Grove? No?
I don't know. Listen, man. Listen, I've made 3 oaths in my life to God, the Army, and the Wu-Tang Clan. So I don't know about that.
It almost seems kind of. It almost seems kind of.
Remso,
yeah.
Man, that they never talk philosophy. Bummer.
Yeah.
Not the Wu-Tang thing.
No, but it almost seems kind of.
Wu-Tang is life.
It almost seems kind of pathetic, Remso, that you would have these politicians like who's that guy that Alex Jones caught when he interviewed him about Bohemian Grove? What's his name? He was the Clinton advisor.
Oh, I know he ran away and was like, "You have to make an appointment with me. You can't film me in public."
David Gergen, that's it. David Gergen.
I haven't heard
yes.
that name in a minute.
So when
we made an oath and agreement.
Okay, so when I look at that guy,
what was the owl god?
when I
Who
look
was he? What was the effigy?
Mo Lock, Mo problems. That's what I always say. But when I look at people like that, I don't see somebody who's that philosophically interested. I see somebody who may enjoy dressing up in funny outfits and parading around. But that is another thing that I think is lacking today. That our leadership does not have real, legit mystery school traditions that they're a part of. So if you look at ancient Rome, for example, Remso, or ancient Greece, what did they do? They had Saturnalia. They had all kinds of different mystery school traditions that they were a part of. Today, it seems like they're phoning it in. If they do it, then they're phoning it in because nobody that I could take a look at right now in the political spectrum even comes close to a Marcus Aurelius or any one of these names. So I'm curious, Remso, this is kind of shifting the conversation away, but I think it's still based in this particular topic. Why do you think it is that we aren't getting these Marcus Aurelius type figures or people who we would look back on, like Cicero, for example, people of that ilk that we would look back on and praise as being the foundations of their time? What do you think is going on there?
I would juxtapose you in saying that I believe they all have the same ideology. Genuinely, if we're talking about our elected officials, whether they consider themselves conservative or liberal, I think it has to do with the pursuit of power. And I mean, let's look at the United States, for example. You always hear around the campaign season, let's remember what the founding fathers talked about and blah, blah, blah. But, we have new founding fathers, whether we like to admit it or not. It's FDR, LBJ, and Wilson. I mean, Woodrow Wilson. So those are our 3 founding fathers. And what did they go after? They went after a very, very hefty pursuit of power that aligned with their progressive goals. So I would say that, in terms of the educated class, what they found is that, it's like whenever I used to interview economists and stuff like that, I would always ask them, it's like, why, if you know how the economy works and you're so good at finances and everything, why aren't you rich? I've never met a rich economist. And the only rich economists I've ever actually met were people like Stephen Moore, who became econ Fox News whores, where it became less about actually trying to advise based off principle and it became more advised based off who's writing the check. Those are the only rich economists because they're not putting out actual policy. They're putting out propaganda depending on who's paying them. I mean, he went from from Ted Cruz to Donald Trump in less than a second, started changing his stance on border walls, spending, and infrastructure and everything else. That's not the club for growth, Stephen Moore and people like that, but there are no rich economists. It's like, there was an article at the American Conservative a while back. It was why writers make horrible politicians, because there used to be, and I still think that, in the conservative movement, there's kind of like this fetishization towards the columnist, the writer, the pundit. It's like, this person knows it. This person has the feel for it and the drive for it. This person should be president. Those people are actually like the worst people to get involved. And it doesn't come down to a character issue. It comes down to the fact that, you get to the point where rough and tumble ideology ends when actual action has to be taken, because you don't get any takesy backsies when it comes to that.
And Grayson, what do you think of this? And then I'm going to go to Prudentialist.
Well, Remso, yeah, thanks I'm glad you were here. I'm glad you're here, and I really appreciated everything you said. I think that
I put pants on for this. You're welcome.
Oh, wow. You didn't have to.
I know, but I did.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's definitely something in the idea of it being all centered around the pursuit of power. And I think that you can connect that back to the idea of being based as speaking truth to power. I had this real kind of, schizoid epiphany as I was listening, which is that I think being based is a deeply Judeo-Christian concept. And what I mean by that is that why would you want to identify yourself with a crackhead acting crazy on the street? That is sort of by definition the most, marginal figure you could identify yourself with, right? But it goes back to this idea, right? I mean, like, you wouldn't want to identify, can you imagine someone in ancient Rome being like, oh yeah, you're just like the beggar on the street, man. That's awesome. Like,
Well,
no,
we do have we do have certain figures out there, like for example, who's that? The cynic philosopher. What's his name?
Diogenes.
Diogenes.
Yeah, sorry.
Diogenes, and not the Diogenes from that stream, Geo. You know who I'm talking about. But
well, I think this is of one piece. You have kind of the philosopher, the dissident philosopher tradition in Athens. You have Diogenes as kind of the strongest embodiment of it, but you have Socrates as well. And then, in Judaism, you have the prophetic tradition where you have all these people acting super crazy, being asked to like perform these very strange actions in order to kind of allegorize the current state of Israel or Judah. And then, with Christ, you kind of have the ultimate marginal figure becoming the ultimate center. So I think there's something there in the idea of being based, that kind of the most marginal figure or idea you can imagine has merit and value to it by its very nature, right? It's like, it's like Rene Girard writes about, where, kind of the victim or the marginalized is placed at the center in Christian and post-Christian society, and that explains so much of what's going on right now.
But is it just the victim? Go for it.
I was just coming. Yeah. So I think that explains also the tug of war over the term based, because what I think is kind of going on is you have, I think the reason that them trying to use it struck such a nerve with Sarva Mari and Patrick Deneen and Adrian Vermeulen and all these people, is that there's this sense that the two kind of dominant ideologies, which, as Remso was saying, are, you could look at as two sides of the same coin, being liberalism or being the pursuit of power, however you would want to have it, is kind of progressivism and kind of right libertarianism, I guess. And these two kind of divide the world between them, right? Freedom in the boardroom, freedom in the bedroom. And I think that when the reason people took offense at Hannah and Brad calling their new site based politics is that it was the center trying to appropriate the margin. But that's like the paradoxical thing in Christian and post-Christian society, is that if you can appropriate the marginal identity, you've seized power in some way. And they're saying, no, we're the people on the margins, damn it. Like,
yeah, I mean, what I think is going to be interesting is, in marketing, I'm probably screwing up the term, but it's like the 2-year test. If you can look at your own logo and company name and not feel kind of cringy when you look at it, it shows that you've got good longevity. I don't know if Based has that. And I'm not saying that as like, a silent diss. I just genuinely don't know. I think this is one of those things where it's like they're really going to succeed because they'll, and ultimately because they've owned it at this point, they have to continue to do that. The real test is going to be whether or not they stick with that or switch it for something else over time. But I mean, I think that's the very difficult thing. It's like how you had all these right-wing spin-off groups, PACs, publications, whatever. They were trying to take, America First, MAGA, all this other stuff, and they're mostly gone now or they rebranded like half a dozen times because when you tie yourself to a moment, you divorce yourself from, all the future possibility that can come with that when you do that. And that can be the same about anything. But I mean, that was my only, personally, as a digital marketer, that was just my thing. It's like, can they take this very, off kilter political jargon word and can they own it themselves? Can they make a fixed brand ideology behind it? And two, will they pass that longevity that comes with it?
Well, I do think based is on its way out, but there is this weird thing where you do see certain terms that originate in kind of fringe cultures making their way up to the highest echelons, right? You have like being canceled was something that originated in catty Twitter fights, oh, so-and-so is canceled. Like this guy stood me up for our Tinder date, so he's canceled, right? Like,
but once it gets to the mainstream, doesn't it die? Isn't that the natural cycle?
Now there's prestigious think tanks having symposia about cancel culture, and there's French academics talking about les woke coming to destroy their society. Like it's insane. And yeah, woke comes from a fringe culture as well.
Yeah,
so.
Yawn. Now I want to hear from Prudentialist, because some people have been saying, Prudentialist, are you asleep or are you charging your power level? And also, look, Prudentialist, your face has already been seen on a different stream. I wonder, could you reveal your... There we go. Look at that. Everybody is on camera now.
I always thought you were black.
Everybody subscribe. Everybody subscribe right now for Prudentialist and his wonderful mustache and his beautiful sweater. I love your sweater, Prudentialist.
Oh, thanks. But no.
One of us has to shave.
Wow,
at least he's not talking about pillaging and just see. Never mind.
Well, no. So it goes. I'll start from the back right before Hannah left, and I'll try and bring it up to here. I think that one of the biggest issues with it is that it is also a generational issue, because if there's any proof of the last 26 years, so my lifetime, is that you've had a generation and probably two now that have been raised almost entirely online, and their politics are online. We've seen over the last 60 years, single-parent households go up, school quality has decreased, and so people turn to the online sphere for a sense of parenthood. That's why you have channels like How to Dad or Dad, How Do I Have Over 1 Million Subs? There's these vital advice that they're not getting. And so you have this whole generation and a half of people that are completely deracinated. And that's why you do get the whole problem of digital deracination. People are overly online. And that's why a lot of people kind of struck a nerve when this word was being used. I think that the word is probably on its way out, because I think in the same way that cuckservative is out, notice how the progressives aren't using liberal or woke anymore. It's an aspect of identity, and especially with the niche part of it all. I mean, for goodness sakes, Martyr Made on Twitter had his whole thread reviewed on Tucker Carlson. Aaron McIntyre had his whole Twitter joke put on Tucker Carlson just last night. Of course, the fringes come to the online sphere. I don't think they're necessarily dead, though. I just think that the left and right, to use those terms loosely, have different ways of mimetics. The right jokes and says oh, the left can't meme, but the left's memes are, diversity is our strength, things like that have now allowed Tumblr users from 10 years ago to now have their language appropriated and used as the national gender strategy, according to Kamala Harris. So there's some things there that has how the fringe comes to about it, but the right fringe never gets anywhere, because I think in some ways that the left is now experiencing, it gets gatekept. The RNC changes its rules during the 2012 convention to have some screwery and skullduggery with Ron Paul, just in the same way that we miraculously see all of the moderate candidates in the 2020 Democratic primary cancel right before Super Tuesday, so the vote is split progressively between Bernie and Elizabeth Warren. There's an issue of gatekeeping, and I think that if anything with our politics, especially because you do have people in the heartland or people who aren't in the DC circle, they get so concerned and they'll wave their Let's Go Brandon flags because they do feel like they've got nothing else going for them. And I work in local areas. I talk to my local GOP and we talk about local issues and policy because I think that matters. People have the most power geographically close to them. But I think it was Garrett that said it best, that, the revolution's come and gone. Remso's right. FDR, Wilson, and the rest of them, that's what happened. He wrote about it in 1938. Burnham wrote about it in 1941. And people are finally kind of coming to terms with that the revolution it did pass us. And we're seeing such this reaction, and everyone's pulling in 10 different directions about it. And whether it's going to be post-liberal, post-libertarian, post-Christian, whatever it may be, is kind of, I think, we're the point in time where we are, because people are realizing, whether you're overly online or you're working in traditional spaces, that there is a huge disconnect. Or even Mike Cernovich today was talking about polling, about how most people are afraid about what they say online getting them canceled versus household accidents, car pileups, murder, getting robbed,
Dragons.
the basic, the things that people would actually be scared about, right? And so I think, just to sort of wrap it all up here and back to the word and this sort of political moment, is that we're in now a situation where people are sort of trying to figure out what comes next. I do think we're sort of in a transitory moment in our politics, because you'll get people who are online or sort of fringe. I try to avoid labels as well. I think the only term I stick to is realist, because I talk about foreign policy. But that is such an interesting moment, right? Is that we're now in a spot where we, what comes next? The sort of the MAGA America First movement's either been co-opted or they've changed the brand a million times, and they're all in their niche communities. So there's no real organization. And you're now trying to talk to the next generation of voters and young men who are overly online, who find no aspect of real world friendships. And how do you bring those people to care about anything when they've been, I think, in a lot of ways, just blackpilled on the entire political situation, where they feel like they haven't had power for decades?
That's a much better way of saying what I was saying earlier, which Gio found to be insulting towards the audience. But guys, I did not mean it in an insulting way. I'm just saying some of you are, grasping for a leadership figure, and there's nothing wrong with that. But
you get laid, Lev. You get laid.
All right, well, whatever. There's a tweet by Andrew Sullivan that I retweeted today by a 48. No, come on, Gio. This is what it's all about. We want to get we gotta get him on the show. All right,
Oh,
Andrew
God,
Sullivan,
no, please.
BTR. Oh God, yes.
You meet
Oh
that
God, yes.
posting. That's
Grayson.
really-
Grayson, help us out here. So here's the tweet. By a 48 to 27 margin, respondents under 30 agree that, quote, my fear of losing my job or reputation due to something I said or posted online is a justified price to pay to protect historically disadvantaged groups. Let that sink in. So that's, I like how Remso is letting it sink in. So this is something that we're dealing with right now. And the question is, where do we go from here as far as, are we imagining a future where these are going to be the people who are going to be ruling over us? But are they, if they're saying things like that, are they secretly Machiavellian, some of them? Do they know what this game is? Or have they just been cucked spiritually so much that they're actually going to be a pushover to get rid of and put somebody else in power who would be opposed to a lot of these leftist policies? So what do you guys think? And I know, let's go with Remso first.
I mean, I have to say, like, this is a me opinion, because, in my post-libertarian journey, I've had to do a lot of reevaluation. And I mean, I think Hannah was slightly pointing a certain direction when it came to people who have a different stance on immigration. And I want to bring this up with, like, I'm the product of two parents that weren't born in the United States. I grew up in a border town in Arizona. And I've lived and traveled around the world. And I think that, mass immigration just for the sake of it and constantly using jobs and workforce participation as the excuse is wrong. Because what ends up happening is that we need to realize is that as much as there's a logical side of humans, there's also a faith side. There's a different side to us. Like, we're complicated beings. And with that said, I mean, I don't think that economies are just self-sustaining markets that trade and exchange. I think that, they're a product of civilization. They're a product of civil society. And that when you're bringing in people just for the sake of, what they can give to you financially or what they can do for you labor wise, I think that not only dehumanizes them, but that's also an underhanded way of saying that I could find people who are willing to work at a more subhuman level than you can. And to deny that, I think, is wrong. I think that that's part of the issue with, libertarians and the term globalism, because, like 5-6 years ago, I would have considered myself a globalist in the sense of I want unilaterally free trade because, when goods cross borders, soldiers won't. I still believe that to a large degree, but I don't believe in, cutting your nose to spite your face.
Well, it's also, I think, a question of approach, where a good economy and a good culture together would create something that would be, very substantial, both in terms of having a high trust society and having a good economy. So, for example, if you're in the situation which is the opposite of this, where you have all these ghettos and favelas and very undereducated people everywhere, and at the same time, what do you find? You find that these kind of societies, they have these elites that are on the top. There are a few of them, and a lot of them don't go into business. A lot of them just go into government jobs, and they're just the default ruling class. That's not a system that I want to live under. But the opposite would be if you were to have, let's say, more people who would be better educated and have the same kind of cultural ideals to yearn for, and not only yearn for, but actually be able to deliver on those. And then what I think you'll find is you're not going to have, I mean, this may be just too transhumanist idealistic of me, but I think we're already seeing it in places like South Korea, where the amount of robotics that goes into the production of various products has increased, I don't know how many fold, but it's quite a thing to behold. And not that they don't have their own problems there in South Korea, emotionally as well with the culture that they're in, but it's still something to look at and say, can we live the kind of life where we are going to have more things that are going to be automated, done by machines that today are done by people, because we're going to have enough smart people out there to ensure that these things are actually going to run properly. And then maybe we can have different focuses on the society, maybe even going back to certain, I wouldn't say ideals, but certain things that people look back in the past and say, man, if only I could live like this. If only I could live without being clustered together around thousands of people. If only I could live growing my own food, having a household, but at the same time, not having the death during childbirth. At the same time, not having the looting and pillages that would have occurred when somebody invaded your village. So I think that's kind of the thing that people are trying to aim for. People are approaching it from different directions, but it's very rare to have somebody like you, Remso, speak about like the situation with immigration in the way that you did. And why do you think that is? Why do you think it's difficult to touch that third rail, not to the extent of saying, oh, I'm going to include this and this and this person because they look like so on and so forth, but for the reason you stated, which I think is a very valid and critical difference there.
Yeah, but don't you think there's always been like that sort of escape hatch for libertarians since 30 plus years now? I mean, since Hoppe and Heinlein and so forth, that you almost need like some form of an authoritarian structure over this like ideal libertarian society. Like, I think that
I think
we always tend to reinvent the wheel. I guess that's probably what
I feel like you're accurate when you say that, Gio. You're actually very accurate when it comes to it. And I think it was I'm probably getting it wrong. Somebody will correct me, but I don't know if it was Ludwig von Mises or somebody else. But they basically said for us to reach like the pinnacle anarcho-capitalist voluntarist society, you would need a change in human evolution.
Well, was it also Mises who said he actually thought like the British Empire was good because it like enforced free trade over a large proportion of the world?
I'll take it a step further. I mean, F.A. Hayek supported universal basic income. Even Milton Friedman didn't go as far as that. I mean, I think it often gets put on him, but I mean, Milton Friedman pushed for like a negative income tax. I think it gets to the point where libertarians start to realize that the feedback loop hits them a bit too hard, and that we're not going to make the world in our image. And I think that's part of like the individualist paradox. It's like we know how the world should be and why aren't more people like us. But I think that the real, I'm going to use another term, the red pill moment is when you realize that you're not one of many. You're one of as many as you could find. And they're very rare in that regard. And I mean, going back to what you were mentioning about automation, Lev, I mean, that's what really kind of freaked me out over the last couple of years. And I think the pandemic was good and bad in some ways because it showed how technology could be our friend, but how technology isn't sometimes. I mean, thanks to 2020, I mean, some people might disagree with me, but there's no more starving artists. Like the need in North America to provide like copywriters, graphic artists, programmers, people that usually, worked in the areas where it was like your mom was saying, can you make money from that? Like you now don't have any more global audience, especially as like, India and Africa as developing nations continue access to global markets. So, I mean, in America, if you were able to have those skills, well, 2020 accelerated that for you by almost a decade. But at the same time,
there's plenty of starving artists though.
I'm not saying it completely.
Not me. I'm selling my NFT NFTs. It's super
it's
rare.
It's a different
But
case
even-
now. But wait,
Yeah,
if I
but
just
even, like,
finish
the
real
NFT
fast, like I
thing-
used to say that, what would be a doomsday for feminism is when we could create robot women that could cook and fuck you. Like when that
That's-
day comes,
And
that's gotta be a big problem.
And
for a lot of
artificial
women.
wombs. Artificial wombs. That's
Oh,
another
that's
big
so
one.
terrible.
That's
And
awful.
then artificial wombs, I just want to. I'm speaking directly to the audience. When they create artificial wombs, you are morally obligated to smash every single one you see.
Yes, but Larry,
Yes.
Unless it's
right
actively
there.
incubating a baby, then you can.
Oh, I have to go read Rad Fem Hitler tweets after that observation. No, I think that it's really funny. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by some nonsense on Twitter. I think the problem is that there really is. I think the problem with libertarianism is that there's sort of like not a lot of appeal to like not just average people, but I think they don't really address the heart of like why the particular regime that we're living in, why it's so decrepit and sort of on its not even on its way out, but necessarily, but rather its ability to basically contort the lives of most people. I think the problem is that when you've given the sort of sources of power the ability to do whatever they want, more or less, out of some sort of principle or whatever, I think that a lot of people left libertarianism specifically for this. I mean, but nowadays I notice that the ex-libertarians are sort of like going to this like weird how shall I put it?
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused. Are you talking like the pursuit of power or the acceptance that the state is inevitable?
The acceptance of like other forms of deterritorialized sources of power other than just the state.
Pretend
I
I
mean,
was educated
like
in the American
corporations, for
public
instance.
education system.
Yeah, like that's the problem. But then I noticed like the people that were libertarians who have gone to the alt-right, a lot of them now they're sort of like in this weird position. Like, I mean, Richard Spencer is like the biggest example of like, Biden's doing a great job, and I don't know. I mean, well, I also learned today, Lev, that Greg Johnson of Countercurrents shares the same opinions on the Russia-Ukraine situation as you, my friend. So I wonder, maybe we could have Greg Johnson on and he'll
Interesting.
talk about that.
I want to also get some actual Ukrainians who are there to. Who knows? Maybe Lord Miles is going to show up. Surprisingly, Is he
going there?
He's going there. Yeah.
Can I jump in? I wanted to have
Go for
some
it.
thoughts in response to Remso and the Prudentialist.
Oh, and before
actually,
that,
and then I'd love to
I
come
also
up
want to
with
say that we are going to have a Twitter space after this part of it concludes. You're all welcome to go in there, whoever wants, and Oren McIntyre is going to be joining us for the Twitter space as well.
Oh, hell yeah.
So there we go.
All right. Yeah, so in response to Remso, I did want to like kind of follow up on immigration because that's something that I'm like really in flux on. Like I can definitely see ways in which immigration is a net positive, especially economically. I think in certain areas, high-skilled immigration is kind of a no-brainer. Like you want to fix healthcare, you can flood the zone with doctors. But I haven't like spent a ton of time in the immigrant community. I'm not going to pretend I have, but like the interactions I have had with immigrants, I've mostly come away incredibly impressed. Like, I've met guys where they're like, yeah, I lived here for 4 years and then I had enough money to like bring my wife and kids over. And I'm like, oh my God, like I could never do that, And I also think that there's some sense in which like people said Rome had a genius, right? The genius of Rome was rulership to rule the world, right? I think in some sense, the genius of America might be to kind of create a society in which everyone can become assimilated. And that's not to say that America has to just be this tabula rasa. I think that there's nothing wrong with saying like America has certain founding principles, and those founding principles are in many ways derivative of European civilization. I'm totally fine with having, an elite kind of based on that ideology that remains static, that is itself kind of very multiracial. But that's just kind of where I'm at on immigration. In terms of like, letting caravans of people cross the border, like hell no.
I think a lot of people.
And also,
I'm
sorry,
I
can I
wanna-
just, yeah,
No,
I
go
just
ahead,
want to
go
finish my
ahead.
point. Yeah, and I also think that like, when people do come in, there has to be the sense like it's a privilege, not a right that you're here. Like you jaywalk, you smoke a joint, you get a domestic battery charge, like you are on the next plane home type thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is, and I never like to call, I never like to refer to like mass groups because it's like the whole Latinx argument. I always thought that was dumb as hell.
Latinx.
Yeah, Latinx, but
Latinx, like Kleenex.
yeah, I mean, I think the issue that you have sometimes is that I think a lot of people tend to think of the immigrant community in one or two camps. Either they're just robbing the welfare state of your hard-earned tax dollars, and then the other one is that everyone coming over is a lawyer. I think we just need to accept that it's not a black or white issue, and it is more nuanced. I mean, at one point I looked at New Zealand years ago as a possible place to go move. And I mean, the immigration.
Dodge that bullet.
Oh my God, yeah.
Talk about a longhouse station right there.
I was sweating bullets later. I'm like, thank God that didn't work out.
Mommy Jama have.
But it's like the standards to get into the hyper. The hyper multicultural progressive haven of New Zealand is so freaking difficult. Mm-hmm. Like it is, and they take in very few people a year. And I mean, they have the right to do that as a country. And I think, we just need to accept that, the immigration argument should never be distilled as to whether or not they're going to kill everyone or they're your messiahs. I think that's largely been a propagandized argument. But to kind of move it a little bit forward, I mean, Prudentialist was talking about this, and Grayson, you did touch on this as well. It's this idea of, we can't get off the grid. And Gio, you mentioned, like we're never going to be able to go back in time and, grow our own cabbages and live in the woods. I think the future, and I think libertarians are going to be some of the people that are going to be most publicly visible when it comes to this, because to answer your question, I think libertarians maybe, misconstrued or don't understand certain things or have not come to terms with certain things. But I think the one thing that we'll always get right is that, we don't believe that our history started with the last election, like a majority of the world voting populace, if they're lucky enough to vote. I think that we understand that human nature is that people work in their natural interest, and that the natural state of man is one that is going to seek power. That's why power should be as limited and dispersed as possible. But I think going back to the grid argument, the post-libertarian moment is identifying that there are no grids to run to. You can't escape; they'll find you. I think the key is to live on as many grids as possible. That's why, I changed the whole format of my podcast and, really the course of my career, because I was very much in that political activist sphere. And what I realized was that I wasn't doing anything. I was too busy arguing about, how I identify in these big esoteric arguments that people enjoy, but I wasn't benefiting people. That's why I help people, develop skills, develop active and passive streams of income, develop new ways of getting out of the system so they could take as much power that has been taken from them back, because the world is global, whether we want to admit it or not. And if you could be somebody that has as many, has as much capital, has as much, options as possible, has as many skills as possible, not only will you never be starving, but you'll be able to escape a lot of situations that sadly a lot of people are going to have no options other than to comply or die.
That is pretty dramatic when you say it like that, but it may be the case, honestly, for a lot of people.
I mean, I'll close with this real fast, Lev. Like, libertarians, you can't save the world. You might as well save yourself.
There you go.
Well, I will say, if I chime in on the immigration thing? Because I find it interesting.
Sure, and then I had a question for you, actually, Prudentialist.
Oh, go for it. Yes. Cool. Like, it is a nuanced issue, and I agree with Remso entirely. I lived in El Paso for almost a decade, and you can tell that not only do you have like the Paisano issue of people who like say live in Ciudad Juarez and would come over to El Paso to work, but then you also had sort of this issue of identity, because it's sort of its own enclave. But conversations become about like assimilation, right? Is that, well, how do you identify? It's usually Mexican first or El Pasoan first, and then maybe American later. And it's like the real nasty side of it, though, is that you have people come over who genuinely want to work and like provide for their families and get a better opportunity because that opportunity is available to them. But you're also living in a city where the median household income is $23,000, and the city manager, who is overseeing God knows how much destruction of just proper mismanagement of funds. Yeah, no, well, it's like a mayor, but the mayor's more ceremonial, less power. The manager is more in charge of like the budget and things like that. And he makes like $400,000 a year. And I get it, right? Like government salaries, you're always going to enrich yourself, but at the same time, the situation in Juarez is not all like great. You had a string of violence back in like 08, 09 through 09. It's recently seen an uptick more. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's only gotten worse, especially towards women. And so that issue becomes a problem, where that acts as a pressure, and they recognize themselves as two communities. And then, of course, on the other side, you've got various bands and caravans, which we can't even dive into the question of like Catholic charities and who they get funded by, but it's complex because these are societies that want to come in and whatnot. But the assimilation question, I think, becomes really difficult because we want to have that, right? But at the same time, how do you encourage those values to exist where you have, like you said, Grayson, that sort of elite at the top that hold these like American-esque, values that descend from European tradition that have this narrative. And to a lot of extent, in my opinion, a lot of that's been erased. I do think that sort of Christopher Caldwell's book about the 60s sort of reiterates that. LBJ sort of sets the course of history in 65.
Age of entitlement.
Yeah, so I mean the age of entitlement, which I think kind of really makes it difficult for assimilation when we have so many different groups applying for things. Our policy in Ethiopia, right, where they're dealing with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, for instance, has a lot of pressure about the whole Tigray Civil War. Because why? Because we have specific groups that aren't assimilated, that are adhering to their own interests towards the White House. And I think that's what makes it such a complex issue, is how do you foster that? How do you make sure that things are not dangerous? And at the same time, how can you ensure that whatever incentive we provide or whatever opportunities are available don't actually hurt where they come from, while at the same time our own country?
Well, being on the border in El Paso, by the way, birthplace of Eddie Guerrero, where do you stand in the Castizo futurism question, Prudentialist? No, I think bring it up.
Okay. My answer is short and simple. I do think that it's mainly an online thing. It was a great way to sort of have Twitter back and forth trolling with some of the more ethno-nationalist side. But at the same time, it feels like a very weird internet rehash of like people like Karl Rove saying that like Hispanics will eventually vote conservative, and ironically that may be coming true. Who knows? 2022 and 2024 will only be able to tell for us. But I find it to be very memey.
And though Grayson, I know
right.
Grayson,
racism or Castizo futurist. No.
Yeah, I have a question for. Yes.
I mean, you've got Adrian Vermeule's Empire of Our Lady of Guadalupe, right? Along
oh
similar
God.
lines.
Well, you mentioned the Fed Caths. I mean, that's what BAP calls them. But it is kind of strange how a lot of those figures, they've sort of like as of late have this like very weird approach to like quote unquote post-liberalism. And a lot of people like on me and Prudentialist side, we like, don't exactly trust them, but it's just, well, you go ahead, Grayson.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like to kind of cap the immigration thing, like I don't think that like, New Zealand or Switzerland or somewhere that has stricter immigration controls is some evil like ethno-nationalist state, because again, I think that it's totally reasonable for them to say like these are our people and it's our job to kind of take care of them and ensure that they prosper. I just think that there's a sense in which the United States has some kind of genius as a place that can assimilate people from around the world, and that perhaps the best way forward is to find a way to follow that as kind of our national destiny without losing ourselves in the process. But anyway, so Prudentialist, you were talking about things being very online, the Castizo futurism thing, which I'm not even familiar with. I guess I'm not.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
No.
By the way, I don't have any side on that issue. I'm friends with people on both sides, except for this one Finnish autistic person, but that's about it.
I'm online enough that I like vaguely know who BAP is and that he like posts a lot of homoerotic Greek stuff, but like I haven't read his book or anything. But no, I think Based is another example of something that's very online. We might be seeing it transition out of that in real time.
Probably.
Like you were talking about with being cucked, right? Like, I mean, on the show Brooklyn Nine-Nine, like one of the characters called another one a cuck, and I was like, well, okay, like now we know
like
that this has been over for like at least a year. Yeah. So
I like how Stick still uses lamestream media because he's kind of a boomer when it comes to that, but he embraces it.
I like the Rush Limbaugh, God rest his soul, drive-by media. We should bring that one back. I think that one's a good one.
Wait, why is it called drive-by?
Because they don't do any reporting and everything is kind of like, gut reaction headlines.
But Grayson, you said you had a question?
Yeah, sure. I just kind of wanted to ask you about the idea of Based being something that's very online and whether there's like a good side to that. Because on one hand, there's like this meme I saw where it was like, 100 years ago, you'd have somebody in their town that's like, hey, I want to screw toasters. And everybody around them's like, hey, you're crazy. And they're like, yeah, maybe I am. And they live a normal life. And now it's like, hey, I want to have sex with toasters. And you find an online community of 10,000 people who want to have sex with toasters. And you end up being absolutely insane.
Are you a Kids in the Hall fan by any chance, Grayson?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar, but
the whole toast fucking thing
Canadian
from
Kino right there.
Brain Candy. Great movie, Brain Candy. Look it up. Anyway.
So there is this sense in which being very online does, like, you know, you see this with the dissociative identity disorder trend, right? Where it does kind of really amplify these incredibly deviant and harmful behaviors. But at the same time, like, I do think there's something good for that. I mean, like, you know, if you're the only gay kid in your tiny town and you find people online you can talk to and you don't have anyone in real life and you don't kill you don't KYS.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and heroing.
And you don't KYS, like that's a win, I think, right? You know, you're alive still. But
Yeah.
you know, I was thinking about this with the based, right? Like, you know, I grew up like, you know, a kid going to church, going to Christian school, right? And I
Now we're all the gay
felt
kids in small towns in the online right. It's truer than you know, actually. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm derailing you.
No, you're
I went
fine, you're
to
fine.
Liberty University, and one time I was sitting next to a guy on the tram bus that was taking
Jerry's
us
wife
between
ever come on to you?
campuses. I wish she did. I wish she did. I don't want to work. I would love to be a kept side piece for her, but no. Like this guy was like, you know, part of the Young Republicans, and I thought he was just like, you know, a Jerry Falwell Jr. type. He was a worship major of all things, and he was on the phone, and I thought he was talking to like his wife or something, because I knew he was in a relationship. So, you know, he hangs up and he's like, oh, sorry about that. I'm like, oh, like, you know, was that your girlfriend? He's like, no, that's my husband. And I was just like, okay. That took a direction I didn't think it was going.
Yeah.
You
I don't know,
said
but,
Young
like,
Republicans and my husband. That's kind of
interesting, yeah.
No, that's part and parcel of joining the Young Republicans, I swear.
No, I
just
wish.
like, I don't know.
Yeah, what do you
Becky
think?
Falwell-
What do you
like,
think
I'll
they
say,
do?
Becky Falwell is a fox. Like, I'm actually offended.
Oh, yeah.
She didn't want to come on to me. Like, I
she didn't want to
work.
Ronald you
She did.
as a professor.
But
I don't think I would have
Wait,
wanted
oh,
to see Jerry
yeah,
Jr.
sure,
in
but
the corner staring at me.
But Grayson, I think you still had your question.
Just
I wanna
pretend
make
he's
sure.
not there, Remso. Yeah.
It's hard when he's breathing at me.
So yeah. So my question about like based being very online is like, do you think that there's anything good there? Because I don't know, if I'd had the concept of being based when I was a kid, like it probably would have encouraged me. And you do see there's this movement that's like, you know, a really strong trend in certain Christian circles of like big Eva, like evangelical Christianity in general, like drifting to the left just because they don't really have any resources to resist this idea of like, oh, come on, it's just about being nice. You know, it's just like our ideology is just common human decency, right? Like, you know, embrace CRT and all this other stuff because it's just human decency.
Cut your kid's
And
dick
it's-
off.
And like, and the response to that is like, you know, being based, right? Is being like, yeah, no, LOL based, right? Or,
Yeah,
you know,
well-
the yes man meme, right? And I think it gives
Yeah.
you a defense mechanism, and it gives you a sense of like, no, I'm not just a weirdo, like I'm not just a loser, I'm not just a square, like I'm based.
I do think it provides a certain sense of online identity. That's for sure. And it's a great way to almost, in a sense, counter virtue signal or anti-virtue signal and let other people know that, you know, you disagree with what's considered to be paused or what's considered to be a part of this progressive woke mess that has sort of steamrolled most of society in very
The
rapid
gay, the global
succession.
American empire.
Yeah, or what people call the big gay, the global American empire, right? And you're right. There's a lot to it because I think, especially in the last 2 years, with everything that's happened with the virus and everything, if online communities definitely had saved a lot of people, and I'm a part of my own circles, and we all relish in the fact that we can all have these conversations and talk with one another. The issue, though, I think that has been a big conversation for a lot of us is that, great, it's overly online. You can find a community, but that community is mainly online. in which, you know, for many people who have opinions that may be considered outside of the norm or outside of the Overton window, if people get worried about, you know, meeting in real life, or that they're just happy to just type away and resign themselves to that location.
It's always a Fed on the other side.
Oh yeah, there's always a glowy on the other side. Heaven forbid you go meet somebody, right? I'm gonna go meet Schizo Mutual, you know, 1247 with no real name on his Twitter account. This will be great.
We're gonna meet Cum Gripper 14.
Right. And I already told him my name and address. It'll be fine. But the other. Yeah, the other side of the coin, however, I think, and this has been a conversation I've been having on my channel, I've been talking about with numerous other people, is how do you translate all of this energy, and how do you translate this sort of just digital deracination where you feel like you're going to, especially with younger people, where they will just speed run, so to speak, through every ideology or denomination or religion.
Yeah.
And then they find themselves all burnt out because the zealotry of a convert is gone, and they just find themselves this empty sort of black pill husk. And I've talked about it to the point where it requires older people, and I think even people my age or, you know, anyone older, to start to invest and take stock in those young people who are looking at the world or modernity, and they find it to be this, you know, this Nietzschean abyss they're really tired of staring back at. And you have to invest your time to sort of teach them these skills and teach them how to do things. And so whether you're an automotive mechanic or you're like Remso, who wants to create multiple forms of passive income, I think it behooves us, either after we've saved ourselves. I think, at least in my perspective, I'm more community oriented and more church and small towny, I guess, where after you save yourself, I can't look at that and just say, all right, I'm good. I have to look at my fellow man and see who has a chance and to aid them, because I think at the end, whatever comes next will require some form of community. And I don't think that has to be just on every platform online. I think that also has to exist in the real.
But how do you like, well, I wanted to ask about passive income, but I think like it's fascinating what Grayson, you brought up about the evangelicals. I think like in some ways it's a good thing, and in some ways it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing in that the GOP will be robbed of like, well, maybe that is a good thing. What am I talking about?
You're Orthodox, right, Gio?
No, I'm really Catholic, yeah, but
Gio's Catholic.
You just look
Orthodox.
You just look Orthodox.
Well, okay, hold on. Speaking of Christianity denominations, I want to make an announcement. It is finally confirmed. We have a guest tomorrow for the great debate stream on whether, some of you guys are not going to like this, on whether Christianity was created by the Roman elites. And this is going to be with James Valiant. And who is debating James Valiant? It is Lambda. Twitter at I am Lambda. He is an English Baptist YouTuber. Lambda Bible Studies. I'm going to paste that one in as well. But also, it may be that
Is Lambda the one who did the stream with Sargon of Akkad?
Yes, that's
Proverbs?
Mr. Luke. Yeah,
that was excellent.
And not only
I gotta see that one.
And not only do you have to look forward to that, but you're also going to look forward to Gravitas possibly appearing sometime around the middle as well.
God.
So there we go, fellas. It's going
to be pop into the after hours room on that one. It's
going to be a very interesting experience.
But I think it's interesting that you mentioned of evangelicals. I think the first one was that Schaefer Shell, that Schaefer sellout who was talking about like, the conservatives are evil. It was like this thing in the Atlantic. And I think it's funny because I was reading this article about this thing in evangelical circles. It's primarily for women, of course, called Enneagram or something like that. I don't know. And it's like,
you know about the Enneagram. That is some real culty stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like,
are they trying to sell you like essential oils?
I think
but MLMs do take on this weird evangelical like twist sometimes too. It's very strange.
Like if you can I wanted to ask you like if you can get into it more, like how do you see that the like landscape of evangelicalism in America is like changing towards like, I guess maybe wokeification is a terrible word, but like as a Catholic myself, as a Mediterranean, this is like so alien to me, like just doctrinally, but also just like the vibe of like American evangelical Protestantism. And like, are they consciously trying to like lift themselves out of like, Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, Chick-fil-A evangelicalism, or is it kind of like pop country music type thing? Like, what is it? Like, what is this property of like a leftoid version of American evangelism? Like, I don't know.
Well, I can't speak. I mean, I don't want to speak for like American evangelicalism just because I'm not an evangelical, right? Like I'm an Anglican, and I'm like a very high church Anglican. Like I consider myself an apostolic Christian rather than a Protestant. But I think that there's.
I'm like a full deep fried Baptist. So
I mean, hey.
Oh, yeah. Have you noticed these trends, Remso? Well, yeah, go ahead.
Wait, how about?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say, like, I feel like the trend generally is that, yeah, like you said, like they do have this strong association with, you know, Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, this type thing, you know, and I think that what's happening is that partially it's just that they don't have a really strong intellectual tradition to draw on, and that the academy is so left-leaning. That, you know, if you want to kind of be intellectually rigorous and you're not willing to kind of draw on the deeper intellectual traditions of kind of apostolic Christianity, then, you know, you are left with kind of left-leaning academia. But yeah, you've certainly seen, I think, like large evangelical institutions in the U.S. become much more accepting of critical race theory, for example. And again, like I was saying before, I think a lot of it is just their success in branding their ideology as just common human decency.
I was a part of the United Methodist Church for like some time, and I mean everything that you just brought up is like you know, basically dead.
Yeah, I mean they schismed just recently, actually.
They schismed a few years ago, but it's still in effect. But like it's this really uncomfortable situation where you have people within the United Methodist Church that are saying the Black Lives Matter movement is like a continuation of like the New Testament and stuff like that.
This is hilarious though. The BLM crowd in the United Methodist Church schismed with the conservatives because at their annual synod, the conservatives outvoted the wokesters in the UMC. And the reason they were able to do that is because the UMC has, I think they're called conferences, not dioceses, but they have several conferences in Africa. And so the conservative Methodists, oh, this is amazing. The conservative Methodists are
Why are you saying that? You are going to hell.
Yeah, they're a minority in the US. But if you combine the conservative United Methodist minority in the US with the African ones, they can outvote the libs in the US. So the BLM Methodists schismed with the Black Methodists because the African Methodists were too
against
big.
BLM. We need Ugandan futurism.
Oh, God bless them.
The joke is that you're gonna have black missionaries from Africa come and preach to the white United Methodists. Why are you going to hell? Why you do this? I can't wait to hear what the enemy racists have to say about that.
But that actually happened one time in university. That was a good day.
Okay. Apparently I'm black though as Italian, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I mean, kind of gets taken a step back. Like, you know, when it comes to a lot of the issues of, you know, American evangelicalism and everything, I used to be very, you know, cynical about it and stuff. And while there are definitely pros and cons to it, like I almost see it as like problems I'm happy to have because it means that people care. I mean, you know, when you look at, you know, the Protestant sector of American Christians, like it still largely outdoes, you know, the Catholic and Orthodox churches and everything else. And while certain, you know, factions of it, like the United Methodists, for example, have lost like 10% in the last 20 years. You're seeing a lot more, you know, Southern Baptist commissioned churches and others around that same ilk kind of pop up. And I think, you know, like, and I really do admire Jerry Falwell Sr. It's Junior who I had a problem with, mainly because I'm upset his wife didn't hit on me. But, you know, it's one of those situations where it's like at least evidence of a struggle doesn't always mean that that's a forecast of a downfall.
But I think like the cultural cache of like evangelical, like that.
Do they even have Chick-fil-A in Canada?
No, we don't. We have one. I think we have one in Toronto.
Such an imaginary country.
Yeah, I know. We only have the biggest of box stores because literally everything is like neoliberal utilitarianism. No, I think like the sort of cultural image of the evangelical is still like the libs still have it as like their boogeyman of like I was watching, there is some YouTuber, some kind of like Illuma something, I don't know, going after like Chick-fil-A and Tucker Carlson. It's like that still, they have this like mid-90s, early 2000s.
They're fighting the silent majority that helped impeach Bill Clinton.
Exactly, yeah. And so I think like the problem with like woke evangelicalism, they're still going to have to like contend with the fact that they're still largely like the boogeyman of like most American libs who say, fuck you, mom and dad. And it's like, I don't know. I think as time goes on, I mean, maybe people will venture towards like more traditionalist Catholic SSPX or like even Orthodoxy. Like I know there's a huge contingent of like Southern Baptists who've converted to Orthodoxy.
The
let me concede something. Let me concede a point.
Orthodoxy.
I've largely been over the last couple of years, primarily because of the pandemic and the response of American churches. It has pushed me personally as Remso. I've been fascinated more with the high church of the Anglican tradition. I've been looking heavily at Greek Orthodoxy and stuff like that, and I'm starting to understand why a lot of my peers at Liberty University at the time, who grew up from a very Southern Baptist evangelical upbringing, why a lot of them did a hard turn towards Orthodoxy. And I think the issue that a lot of American evangelicals have is the issue that a lot of groups have, which is, when does your history start? And I think with the church, primarily from a Baptist view, we talk about the Bible, we talk about those things, but it's like our history only started like yesterday, like last weekend at the recent potluck. But when you divorce yourself from
at the cookout,
hey man, listen, that's why I'll never stop. Like when they bring those green bean casseroles in, I'm a sucker. But when you look at some of these older churches in the Christian tradition, like there's a sense of identity, there's a self of belonging, but there's also more reason behind action. Like a big issue that a lot of my Protestant, I'll talk widely Protestant friends have. Ironically, they're the ones that call themselves based a lot, is that they have just this giant opposition to like big cathedrals and big churches and beautiful pieces of art and things like that. And they even have problems with incenses that are burned and stuff like that. They're like, oh, this is too much. All you need is a shack and a country preacher and a guitar and you're good. But
solos in the
but it's like there's a reason there's a reason why it was that way. It's because largely in Christian history it was a visual history that had to be communicated. And even in our day and age where literacy is higher and everything else and access to information is higher, that'll always be the most personal way to communicate history to somebody. And I think that's what is missing in a lot of the Protestant front, especially amongst American evangelicals. It's that we feel that we are divorced from a longer history.
And I think that ties back to the definition of based as rooted, right? Where like, I think when you have, especially when you have a denomination that leans really hard on the idea of sola scriptura, of scripture alone, you don't really have a history to draw on because you don't really need one. It's just you and your Bible, right? And like, on one hand, like you said, like that's just not workable because by that margin, like, most of the Christians who ever lived were not reading their Bibles because they couldn't read.
Yeah. And they were doing the Mass in Latin. So even if they would be able to read, they wouldn't understand what was going on.
Yeah. So I think that's part of the attraction of traditional and high church traditions in Christianity is this idea of being based, of being rooted in something larger and older and greater than yourself. Because I think it gives you more resources to push back on all this. I think somebody on Twitter I saw called it just all this cultural malware that's getting beamed into your head all the time.
But the question is still
cultural malware.
But the question is still about self-awareness, where I think that there is a certain inherent feeling people have, like for example, when they see things like the Drag Queen Story Hour or things of that ilk, there is, I think, a natural reaction that people have that, hey, hold on a minute, something might be kind of wrong here, what's going down? And I don't think that requires that much introspection to understand. At the same time, though, my only concern, again, with being based in the rooted sense of being part of something where traditionally, like you just said right now, Grayson, a lot of the people who are listening, they were probably inspired visually by the beautiful architecture and the stained glass windows, but at the same time, I'm not sure how much they understood, and also, I don't know how self-aware they were of doing good for the sake of doing good as opposed to doing good because if I do this, I'm going to go to hell. And I think that there is a distinction here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an aspect, I think in Gio might disagree with me on this, but I think in medieval Catholicism you do have this aspect of like using hell and using purgatory also to scare the peasants is something that's present. But to go back to the idea of being based as an online identity versus being kind of rooted somewhere, what Prudentialist was saying, like, I think it might honestly be a good thing if based is reaching the end of its life cycle as a cool, very online meme. I almost hope that it becomes as ubiquitous as Cuck or Snowflake, because I want it to belong to the people. I want people to have this word and this resource that they can use to push back against the insanities of liquid modernity. And I think ultimately it does have to move offline, because people, like you were saying, do need to log off and live their lives. Like I live in the DC area, right? I'm
my sympathies,
plugged into the DC scene. Like I'm doing the DC thing, right? But like I want to have an exit date, like you were saying, like you're saying, Prudentialist. Like I want to eventually move somewhere else and do things with my hands, have an actual yard, grow a garden, maybe run for city council.
Become a warlord.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Mad Max for raiding the local CVS.
When you look at your friends in your network, you need to start really asking yourself who has like the most warlord potential, and you're gonna weed out a lot of distractions.
It's like there was an Onion article a few years ago where it was like back when the Onion was funny, where it was like, yeah, this is probably our most modestly priced living room set, says man who would have been feared warlord for 500 years.
Yeah, that was great.
Or there was that comic with the guy who was chasing the boar.
Like Chuck Liddell a little bit.
I have a friend who's like exactly that. Like he looks like sitting at a desk, he looks like Mr. Incredible. Like he's like 6'7" and just like gigantic, and is just like, yeah, I think that this will be the best strategy for your firm moving forward.
So if we
have, you need to be just like ripping people's spines out of their heads.
Oh, there are some people I think that if like they lived in like maybe the previous like few centuries, they could have been like, for example, Khabib Nurmagomedov. He could probably have been an epic warlord.
He's in charge of Mongolia at that point.
Oh yeah, he's the adjutant.
I mean, we still have certain. We have
the massive
certain
discipline. Yeah. His winning record, the fact that he's a family man. The man basically this is the respect. He choked out Josh, what's his name, and he was mourning the death of his father, and Josh went back into consciousness and comforted him in the octagon. That to me is some epic warlord, like incredible. No, I'm not even joking.
Great. If I could respond to Grayson's point though, Gio, because I think that he's got an interesting point to make about having it for the people. But I think that requires, Grayson, like an actual set definition, which is why I think what Hannah was saying, that she wants to apply her own definition to it, even though I vehemently disagree. Maybe as an online person, but also because I would disagree with things that she is proposing in terms of policy. But I think that you would have to apply a definition for it, because this is an issue that I think for those that either come to church or who had stayed in a particular denomination in faith have this issue for, especially for those who are online, where they'll I don't want to use the word LARPy or being on like that, but it's a part of it where they'll say that there's something, but they don't walk the walk, so to speak. And I think that you have a point there about maybe using the word based as in based or grounded in tradition, especially for the right, because a lot of people will say, I want to be like X, Y, and Z. I want to join the church because they're like based and red pilled. It's not like this evangelical shack that I'll see in my small town. And it's like, great, here's the Philokalyas, start reading, and then they automatically start getting
you definitely have these like you were like, I think Gio was saying earlier, like speed running, or was it you?
Well, yeah, I mentioned
speed running through everything. Like you have people like Zoomer Theosis who are just clearly like incredibly immature individuals.
He makes us all look bad on. He makes us all
like here's
very
like well, I actually apologize to Zoomer Theosis. I think he was misunderstood.
Why would you do that?
Well.
He's watching this right now. I bet he's gonna be on the Twitter Spaces after this.
I misjudged him, and I think it is a good meme example. Although I would think that the other, never mind. I'm not gonna start a beef.
No, but
I get what you mean. Like it's kind of like people that I think a lot of young men in particular don't have a direction. They're sort of like speedrunning ideology.
Well, when it comes to like religion and tradition, though, I think that like even if the online right, or because I mean, there is, Pascal would say, there's some sort of God-shaped hole in them, and it's not always necessarily Christian, because there's aspects of the right that are not within the Overton window that have decided to go towards like ancestor worship or various forms of Indo-European pagan traditions, which of course gets the back and forth between even those fringes on the right itself, between Christians and whatever it may have. But I think at the same time, right, is that there is this lingering call for what it is. And I think that Lev kind of mentioned at the very beginning about teleology. And I think that's one big thing that sort of separates, in very broad sense, like the left and the right. And I'm sure there are people on other sides that may not have it. But having a good teleological grounding, I think, is something that needs to be a focus. And yeah, politicians are about power. But for the average Joe that wants to survive modernity or whatever you want to call it, having a good teleological grounding is what matters. And so when I'm on stream or I talk about what I want to do and the things I do in real life, I just say, listen, my goal for right now is to plant the vine and fig tree that my children will sit under and live in a world where they're not afraid. If I can accomplish that, I will die a happy man.
Hell yeah,
but,
man.
you know, not, for everyone else, it can vary. And I think that's why so many people get attracted to the church or are attracted to these online communities. If you want the word base to be out there for everybody, it's going to have a pretty decent definition, but unfortunately, it's also probably going to piss some people off. Like, if Hannah wants to stick with that brand, so be it. But I mean, to a lot of people, whether it's online or the heartland voter who doesn't know what the word is, I mean, it'll be a marketing sell. And I think Remso probably would know a thing or two about that.
Well,
Yeah,
as,
I think so.
But I think
as
like,
Sure. Can I? Sorry,
go ahead.
Remso. I know you haven't said anything about it, but I wanted to circle back to something Lev was saying. Like you mentioned, people kind of having this visceral, like, I don't know about this when they see Drag Queen Story Hour, right? And I actually wrote about this in my piece, The Battle for Base, that kind of like sparked this discussion, which, you know, I thought, like, you know, picture like the average, you know, Joe Rogan listener, right? They're like, oh yeah, I don't like, you know, giving hormones to kids, and I'm not so sure about this Drag Queen Story Hour stuff. Like, this is a little crazy, but like at the end of the day, like, what kind of philosophical resources do they have to really push back against that? And the answer's not much, really. I mean, if you're kind of rooted in the classical liberal tradition of the idea that like the purpose of society, of the state and society, is to kind of maximize individual freedom, like this is, I've come more and more to the conclusion that this is where you end up when you have that starting point. And that's why I think that you need the idea of being based. You need the idea of being rooted.
but it doesn't mean to take away
bigger to push back against this, because otherwise it's just going to be the conservatives in 20 years meme.
Sure, but here's where I would disagree. I don't think it means you have to take away classic liberalism. How I see classic liberalism.
Exactly
Hold
what it
on,
means.
Geo. Hold on, Geo. Let me get this out.
Jeez.
This is important. So, when I'm talking about classic liberalism to me is not an end. It's not a means to the end being classic liberalism. It's just a means to at least have a kind of economic and social system where we're not going to kill each other. That's what it does.
Yeah, I mean, if you go on my Twitter, like, you won't see any labels. Like, I used to put like libertarian or Republican this or whatever, and it got to the point where it's like the label stopped mattering, because I realized it's like I don't want to find identity in these really man-made secular constructs. I mean, classical liberal, libertarian, you know, anarcho-futurist, capitalist. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, those are just ways of mentally mapping out how you reach certain solutions.
Yes.
You know, mine would involve peace, voluntary action, nonviolence, communication, a method of exchange, value for value. But that's not my identity. I mean, my identity is Christian. My identity is American. My identity falls into other things
Exactly.
that I have to lean on more. And I think, you know, and this is the problem with a lot of young men. I mean, I fell into kind of like a meme circle like a month ago. People were making fun of me, and it was genuinely funny, because I started doing jujitsu during the summer. So eventually I reached peak podcaster, a podcaster guy who you know, talks about dope and also does jujitsu. But it's like, you know, why did I go for that? It's because I moved to a new area. I didn't know anyone. I wanted to work on these skills, and I found a community that's good for me mentally, spiritually, and physically. And I think
like,
And you also seek out
it
haunted
is weird when
houses,
people
right?
go after
I also
you.
do
It's
that
really-
too. But, you know, choking people now has a great benefit to your overall positivity.
Imagine choking out a ghost. Imagine how awesome that would be. But
I'm
Grayson,
using cosmic jujitsu for
Yes.
that now, Lev.
but Grayson was talking before about walking the walk, right? So you know who's really good at walking the walk? The Chinese. Get it? Walk Okay, fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
I
so
don't want to.
no, I
I don't
think-
want to
No,
award
no.
that behavior. With
no,
a
no,
laugh.
but with the with the Chinese though, you do have a sense of rootedness, even if they're living under communism. Not exactly, but rooted within the stuff that happened during Mao, but also rooted with all the
Alibabaism.
Alibabaism, as well as I think some of the mindsets that prevailed during all the imperial times in China. I don't think that went away. I think that sense of being ruled by an emperor is still there with a lot of Chinese people. You could say that they're also based in, for example, they're not going to have the drag queen story hour. They're not going to have, wasn't it some policy recently where they did not allow certain groups like BTS because they're too effeminate? People would point at
they have this
Yeah.
ban on they have this ban on that they're trying to enforce on effeminate men within the media, and they're trying to enforce a limitation on the amount of video games that children can play, which honestly, I'm not super opposed to the idea of limiting children's exposure to technology.
We have to destroy all K-pop.
My joke whenever I talk to libertarians is I'm
force.
like, I used to work at a place where there was this libertarian guy who was a scholar, and his big thing was how permissionless innovation in tech
Is he
is
an
important
alcoholic?
because it's not that I'm aware of.
Alcoholic.
But his big thing was permissionless innovation in tech, because that's why America has all the great tech companies. And my response was always oh great, the iPhone has 4 cameras now, and 60% of 11-year-olds are addicted to porn. Maybe in 10 years the iPhone will have 8 cameras and all the 11-year-olds will be addicted to porn. Right?
I think this is the problem though, I think with right-wing cinephilia in some ways, because there's people I'm just making enemies. There's this one particular celebrity
will come off.
of the Castizo variety who talks about how based China is, and I think that there are a lot of based things that China does, like banning K-pop and internet porn. But I think the problem is that you're sort of ignoring the technocratic nature of a lot of these regimes.
Exactly.
Is the millions of abortions based? Is that the one-child policy based? I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean,
this
some
is why I
people
go
on the right would
crazy
say
when-
so.
This
but
is
that-
why I
you
go
know.
crazy when Russia tries to frame itself as the last bastion of the Western tradition or whatever. Where
I don't know.
Well, okay, so I agree with Russia's critiques of the West. When Russia's oh, the West is decadent and horrible and whatever.
Right.
I'm yes, you're right. But also Russia is not some bastion of traditionalism. Russia has
No,
the
that's
highest
very
abortion
true.
rate in
No.
Europe.
Yeah.
Russia has the highest abortion rate in
And
Europe.
not only that, but with the
Yeah.
immigration from the various places, they have this policy where they would pay them to come in and to vote for, the politicians. And also they allow all the Chechens to do whatever they want to with the Russian women, and nobody bats an eye because of their little contract. So it is far from being a based country in a lot of different ways. And I'm not going to go on the Russian tirade. I'm not going to fall for your trap.
Some kind
Look,
of
this is
escapism?
your black African and blonde woman cuckold porn fantasy where you're oh, the Chechens are violating the Russian women and Putin's allowing it to happen. My God, this is the alt-right talking about black
Why are you this way?
for you, Lev. No.
Except this is
Why are you
actually
this
real.
way?
Oh, is it true though about the Chechen men and the women?
Yes, it is true, Gio.
Yeah,
It
but
is
see,
true.
I guess, yeah. In greater Europe, of course, you have the Sorry, Prudentialist, I cut you off with the.
Oh no!
cuckold,
What I was saying though, I think was just that a lot of this based Russia
cornuda, as we say in Italian.
or based China is a lot of, I think, just some kind of form of political escapism where it's okay, things
Yeah.
are pretty decadent in the West. Oh, these oh, Alexander Dugin's got a really good critique of the West, or Vladimir Putin said some quote unquote based things in an interview on Russia Today. And at the same time, once again, don't look at the man behind the curtain. And this is the same thing with China. The funny thing about China, though, right, is that, all right, we're going to ban effeminate men and we're going to limit their access to video games. We're going to keep sending all of our elites to American colleges where all of this woke shit is. So, it's only, I think, a matter of time to some degree where that happens. But
Imagine,
both of those
social credit, but woke or whatever.
Oh God! But I mean, it's coming here already, right?
Mm.
But the thing is that China and in Russia, to a greater extent, I think, from a geopolitical term, is what makes it different from, say, like the United States, especially, is that they view themselves as civilizational states. We often say that China has this uninterrupted 5,000-year history. It's primarily a Han majority. And you have to secure yourself as that civilizational state, make yourself a middle kingdom.
And that's not true either, right? China's been conquered by so many different people.
Well, and it's had its conquerings, and it's had its own various civil wars.
Yeah.
But this is the view. This is the political formula that they operate on, which is why we're also seeing the ethnic crackdowns inside China. We saw it with Tibet in the mid-2000s. We're now seeing it in the Xinjiang province. I mean, Russia views itself as a civilizational state. That divide between sort of Eastern and the rest of the steppes and the Urals. And that's what makes it so interesting, is that you have these very complex societies that get looked at by usually geographically illiterate Americans that have no real sense of what on earth those parts of the world are like. And they're like, yes, this is based. I want to go here. And it just makes for very bad discourse.
Well, it's a
grass is
greener on the other side deal.
The convoy is being funded by Russia now, so there you go. That's
not our favorite man of the Open Society Foundation. Okay.
Yeah, no, but that's the other side of it, is that there's like Russia is at the heart of everything. Russia is like the grand puppet master with Steve Bannon.
Because we have to read, because this is the only thing, right, that our elites know is that everything has to be compared to Adolf Hitler, and we have to avoid another Vietnam. And that's basically where we're at in this position. Yeah. And God forbid someone says something remotely realistic, or otherwise they get sacked, like that German Navy chief.
Well, this is why it makes me laugh when, like, this is something I've noticed on, like, Tucker Carlson recently, is he'll just offhand be like, yes, Biden is just like this Ottoman Sultan from the 1600s who, like, was put in place by the Queen Mother, who was, mentally ill, but they could puppet him, just like Biden's. I'm like, I don't know, just like, yes, please, more references to just like obscure like history from
and there is also
ago. Don't just compare everything to like
and there is also another thing, and there is also another thing that I find that people repeat time and time again when comparing to Russia and China, where they say, well, America's no better than Russia or China. They try to equate the two, and I think that that's a very unnuanced take on a lot of these things, and it is, I think, coming from more of a grass is greener on the other side type of deal.
You know what you should watch, Lev?
What?
And you're, of course, a co-patriot of his. There's this video from 2014. I forget. I think it could not Brookings. What's the one that does Uncommon Knowledge? What is that institute? The Libertarian one.
Cato.
I think it was Cato or some other institute like that. Mersheimer did this talk called, I believe, How Ukraine is an American Problem. And he goes into basically how they're exploited the crisis to gerrymander the situation against Putin and to basically prevent Putin from cutting off the gas.
I just watched that talk. It was 2015.
2015, yes. It was right after
2015
Crimea.
talk.
With the 2014 revolution you're talking about?
Yeah, from Crimea. And, Georgia was like, 2008. That's ancient history in internet time.
That's Friedman's book that he references that. But yeah, Mearsheimer's lecture is 2015. I don't know if it's the Cato Institute. But yeah.
I can take a look at it, but the one thing I want to keep in mind with a lot of these things is I don't want people to have this sense that individual countries and the people within them have no sense of willpower. It's almost like the CIA is like this demiurge that is able to control all the things that go on in the world, and people can't come to their own decisions and end up changing things on a local level that end up spiraling out. And I'm not saying that there wouldn't be certain advantages that would be taken by CIA or by some other organization, never let a good tragedy go to waste, like they say, but I think it's more complicated than just blaming any kind of organization on puppet mastering every single global event that goes on.
Well, Lev, now that we're on this topic, what do you think about the? Do you think America should pull out? And what is?
All right, no, opinion? I could give you my take. I don't like.
I'd love to hear it.
Yes, I don't like the fact that right now, and I haven't been following it as closely because of all the scheduling things as I would want to. But from what I'm able to see, I don't like this whole. Putting out the military as, like testing out toys, things of that neocon nature. Rather, I think this is very simple, what should be done here. Take all the property, all the assets from the Russian oligarchs in Europe and the United States. Ship their kids back to Russia. Just take all their property, take all their shit.
Why?
because then the Russian oligarchs, as soon as that starts happening, they'll take Putin out themselves, because that is where all their money is.
No,
Lev,
but he's
Putin
too
knows
powerful for
judo.
them.
He rides bears.
I basically gave you guys the answer to all of our
he's too
problems right now.
I don't know.
No,
Lev,
he's
I'm
not.
convinced
He's not.
that
No, he's
weak
not.
in any
No,
way. He's
he
ascended
depends.
Russia.
No, Gio. He depends on the oligarchs around him. If they sense that he is not good for them, then they're going to eat him alive, like the hyenas ate Uncle Scar at the end of Lion King. Sorry, spoilers.
Incredibly based film.
Yes. No, I'm just saying.
What was that film where the lions were hunting
Yes.
people?
I don't
Is that the
remember.
fil-
But basically,
Yeah, that was the one,
Russia has so much resources in the West. They invest so much money into real estate, into all kinds of luxury goods here. All the kids of the oligarchs don't want to spend time in Russia at all. They'd rather live in the West. They have swanky apartments here, houses. Just take that shit. Just take it.
I heard somewhere that all the NHL players that come over here from Russia, like Putin just like personally gives them like a credit card that's just like no limit.
Yeah.
They can just party
That's
as
true.
much as they want
Just
in the
to front
US.
them.
After the salary caps, you know.
I'm
Fuck
sure
him.
he does.
Fuck you, Gary
And they're-
Bettman. Fuck you. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You ruined hockey for Canadians. Not that I particularly give a shit about Canada anymore, but Gary Bettman is a ghoul. He ruined hockey. They got rid of the goons, and as soon as you get rid of the goons, it was all over. Hockey, now they have the fucking Black Lives Matter salute. It's terrible. They take everything working class and they destroy it. Hockey used to be the most working class sport next to professional wrestling.
This is why you have to watch Letterkenny. Like,
you're gonna hate
Wait,
it so much,
are
Gio.
Pug Bunnies still
No.
around?
The thing,
Gio,
the thing is, it's a genuinely good show. Like the writing is brilliant, it's hilarious, but just like occasionally you get these little psyop moments where like these
hardworking farmer guys are in an open marriage.
Canadians who just happen to agree with like every new idea of the trans lobby, you know.
And then there's like no other like recourse to like geography or like aesthetic or whatever affecting someone's. That's what Canada is. Here's a good example for finally my one example, I think, when you were talking about having a base civilization. But before we get back to Ukraine, I wanted to mention that Quebec, I think, is the best example for this. And people have, like, in Canada, it's a big, like, cottage industry thing and, like, political science.
Okay, I was going to say, please talk about Quebec. Quebec fascinates me, and I don't know enough about it.
Yeah. But the thing is with Quebec is that if you want to observe a civilization, what you and Prudentialist were saying, going completely off the rails...
Remso just said he has to leave in 2 minutes.
Oh, shit, yeah.
Do we want to give him, like, a closing statement?
Remso, final words.
Yeah, we should just take Canada. That would really unite a lot of Americans at this point.
It would, yeah.
Great discussion. You know, I hope at the end of the day people enjoy this, but you know, the most important thing in your life is taking back your own freedom. You know, seeking your own happiness in a way that's grounded in reality and grounded in things that, you know, give you a proper sense of identity, other than just you know, a lot of the craziness we've got. So appreciate it, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Remso. Be sure to follow Remso on @HeyRemso on Twitter. Be sure to watch Remso's podcast, On the Run, and you also have a comics podcast as well. So be
Second Print Comics podcast if you need to laugh at something.
There we go. Remso, thank you so much, buddy. I love you have it coming on BTR, and I look forward to having you on again soon.
All right, take care, Lev. Take care, everyone.
Take care. So we are actually going to be switching it up right now into the Twitter Spaces, but it does not mean that this stream is over. This is how I decided to do it, to just test out the waters here. I want to bring the YouTube people to Twitter. I want to bring the Twitter people into YouTube so they actually see this particular stream. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my Android emulator. Here is the scheduled space. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to start this space. It's called What Does Based Mean to You? I mean, I guess we could...
God.
Oh, boy.
We could...
We're going to have so much fun deciding who gets to speak.
There we go. All right,
I'm very excited for this.
Yes, I'm inviting the people right now. While I'm doing that, Gio, shout-outs to the people in the chat.
All right.
I also still want to hear Gio's, what was Quebec-based.
We'll get to the Quebec question as well. In fact, maybe we're going to start with that.
Quebec question. Okay, shout-outs. We got Red Sulphur Cafe. We got... Oh, thank God it's not white sulfur. Oh, my God. Oh, sorry, I'm thinking of phosphorus. Dunk A. Chino, it's like Chino Marino from Deftones.
It's Dunkachino, like Al Pacino.
Dunkachino. Oh, there
Yeah.
you go. Dunkachino. Stop asking for my name. We got PCSS. We got Ruben Modwy. As always, we got Alex DeLarge. We got Titty Dawn, as always. On Canamanden. We got Oscar Toe. As always, got Wide Rim Hatcher. We got Matthew W. In fact, Dunkachino has a $2 super chat. Lev, can you and Bard debate Logo and Pepe Escobar? First of all, who is Pepe Escobar? Secondly,
Pepe
Logo
Le Pew and Pablo Escobar had a child. That's Pepe Escobar.
Well, Logo will never come back on the stream.
Why
so
not?
right.
Why can't he come back? I would be welcome to him coming back. Why wouldn't he come back?
Well, because he believes that Rene Gugnon was paid off by the CIA. That's why he'll never come back. We got Cyber Ninja Zero. We got Matthew W. Of course, we also have Matthew Stout, but he had to go to bed because he's in England. We've got Jack Twister. Effeminate men, no. Tiger penis to heal impotency, yes. We got Botic. We got Geo is a chew. Oh, get him out of here, engineer! No, I'm doing a ghost bit. Alex Alpine, Roger. We got All C, and we finally got some Krillic name I can't understand. Hopper 8338. 8338. The ABC 123456739. Chris Alton, as always. We got No Name. I said Titty Dawn. We got WebM Aristocrat, as always. We got, oh my god, you're punishing me with this name. Dush Goodjuk
By the way, guys, can you hear me? Let's see. Hello.
We got Dush Goodman. I can't. I think he just randomly typed the keyboard to have his name. We got Moose McTrotter, Lisa Bode. Cyber Ninja Zero, and finally we have Ronald Baker. Who else do we have?
Is that an exhaustive list or just a representative sample?
Yeah, intersectional Aryanist. Finally, yes. So this is just the chat. Yeah, I'm trying to look at the new names. Intersectional Aryanist. That's pretty cool. Wide Rim Hatcher. I pretty much got everybody.
Yeah, we're just starting in a bit. In fact, people are already coming in. We got Oren McIntyre inside there. Geo, come in there. For some reason, I didn't see you in the.
Oh wait, you guys all in
Twitter
the
space? Yeah, go into the Twitter space right now. I'm just rearranging some things. Yeah. So we are transitioning right now for the audio to be in a different place.
I was in a great 4-hour space with.
All right, then time to switch over.
Yeah. Do I need to do anything? I'm
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Shit, I forgot to mention it. Okay. So for you guys, here's what you do. You can keep your webcam on. It's fine. Leave it be. Take your phone. Get the Twitter app, and you'll notice the Twitter space that I started. I shared it on my timeline. Go into that Twitter space and make sure your audio is actually coming into the Twitter app, but mute yourself on this one. That's how we do it. That's how we get to have your wonderful faces still on while being able to do this. And let me see if, Let me
mute myself on this one, but join the Twitter space.
Yes, exactly. Now I'm going to see if I can rearrange these screens in a suitable fashion. Let's see. I don't think that's the one. Yeah, these screens are a little bit weird, so I may have to rearrange them in some different way here. So just give me a second. But I really appreciate everybody tuning in. And let's see. It says mic is on, but for some reason I'm not sure if it's coming through. Can you guys hear me, by the way? Right now we have all these people inside of the recorded Twitter space over here. So let's see. We got Geo. I sent the invite. And we got Quay and Prudentialist. Let's see. I'm gonna add you as well as a speaker. All right, speak. Let me hear you.
All right, Lev. Can you
I don't know why.
Let's see
I don't know
here.
why my volume is not here. I don't know what's going on.
Speaker.
It's weird.
We're gonna get ready soon. We gotta add a word McIntyre. Invite to
Yeah.
speak. Prudentialist. We're getting
Yep,
ready.
I'm here.
Okay, good. Well, maybe we can have Tasteful Tyrant as well. That'd be
Can you guys hear me? Sure can.
Yes, but for
Yep,
some reason
we can hear you.
I cannot hear.
Oh, right,
myself.
Lev. We can't hear you, Lev.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on
Oh,
here.
wait, let me just talk. Yeah.
As the only blue check in here, I expect to be treated with proper deference.
There you go. Let's see. Invite to speak, Prudentialist. Let's see, Lev. We can't hear you.
Yeah.
You got to invite Aaron to speak too.
No, you have to.
Here we go.
Oh yeah, I did.
Okay.
Oh my God, I can't believe this, but Oren, did you get the invite, my friend? Let's see. Well, we were talking about in the stream on BTR, we were talking about base, but then we got onto this question of, well, I wanted to use Quebec as a good example. Well, let's wait till Lev. He's like filling around with his emulator, but Prudentialist.
Yeah, just to give everybody a
Hello.
taste early on, why don't you tell
Hello,
me,
hello.
was pre-Quiet Revolution Quebec based?
Oh, definitely, much so. I mean, pre-Quiet Revolution. Like, I think we should study, like, especially on the right, Quebec, in the sense of
Can you give people like a background on it? I'm not sure everyone like knows much about that.
well, basically, Quebec during the '60s, because Canada didn't have a lot of like natural, a lot of immunity to, let's say, Americanization.
Hello.
That what happened was Quebec sort of all of a sudden just dropped its former very religiously based social order, especially around the Catholic Church, and it adopted very much like American style, like liberalism at the time.
Hold on. Oh man. Well, hopefully you guys are hearing it there, and you're not hearing it in the stream, which is not great because I know Gio has a lot to say about Quebec. I don't know why my audio is not on. This is something that I have to do right now. So here, I'm going back in here. Hopefully it works now. So here we go. Let's see.
Like, just look at the insanity of like the Quebec
Hello.
order nowadays.
There we go.
Oh, thank God.
It
but
works
yeah, basically
now.
the fact that you can go from a very based, like religiously orientated people to like now, if you don't have the sacrament, you can't go into a grocery store unless you're accompanied by a Janny.
Bingo.
It's like in the span, like the Quiet Revolution, I think it only took like 10 years or so. And it's very fascinating when you do study it. But unfortunately, like a lot of libs in Canadian academia, they basically have control over Quebec studies itself, especially in political science. So it's not very good.
Yeah, if you can recommend a good book for me on that, I'd be really interested to read more about it. But yeah, like as I understand it, kind of before the Quiet Revolution, so like up until the 1950s, early 1960s, Quebec had this like almost integralist state where you had like a very minimal government, and then education and healthcare were almost entirely the purview of the Catholic Church. And,
yes, very much so.
Like very quickly, like you said, things changed, and you can point to certain things. Like there was a lot of economic growth following the Quiet Revolution, but at the same time, like within a few decades, the birth rate dropped from like 3.8 to like 1.4 or something. Like, and if once you drop below birth rate, it's like once you drop below replacement rate, like how much do the other stats really matter?
Exactly.
Like your society can't sustain itself anymore, Very, very cringe.
Quebec, yeah, exactly. Quebec became like basically any like the nightmare of like the contemporary West in terms of like what the right wing thinks of like all of social malaise, attacking it all at once. And nowadays Quebec is very there's still some identitarians, but unfortunately the Quebec identitarian side of it is very much like more left wing than a lot of like Euro nationalists, like if you compare it to Scotland or so forth. Because in Quebec, it's very much like a ghost dance around their own language because they really don't have the same degree of cultural and religious and even ethnic cohesion that they once did. And so, for example, when Parizeau said money in the ethnic vote, he meant Anglo-Canada basically colonizing Quebec. And so now they have this like weird neurosis around the French language itself. And of course, like, you know, people in France, they like thumb their nose down at Quebecois as like not being an inferior like dialect. So it's like they have a very stark problem with their own like identity and surrounding issues of their own identity, even more so than Anglo-Canada. So, yeah.
Yeah, Jack Kerouac, interestingly, was a Queb. You know, he grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, but in this community that was very much like a Quebecois colony, and really grew up with like Quebecois Catholicism, and you know, grew up speaking French as his first language. His birth name was Jean. Like, really, and that's a really fascinating kind of thread to trace through his writing.
By the way,
we're here to talk about being based.
Well,
so
before the base question, though, before
before
the base question, we have my friend Catherine Brodsky, who is Canadian as well. So before we move on to base, to finalize any thoughts about Canada, what's going on with Canada, I would love to hear, Catherine. I know this is kind of abrupt. If you are interested, though, you are more than welcome to speak and let us know what you think about what's currently going on in Canada.
Canadian about the truckers too.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Now, Catherine, she is in the western side of Canada, so around Vancouver and so, I think. But, yeah, I'm not sure, Catherine, I sent you the link. Again, this is very impromptu, so you may be, like, in the middle of something, and that's perfectly fine. But I want to throw it out there. You are welcome anytime. But anyway, right now, let's get to the base question while whatever happens with Catherine happens.
One day she'll be in the middle of me cooking her a very nice meal.
So, okay. All right, so what does base mean to you? And before that, I wanted to get Oren's take on the cultural appropriation. If Oren, if you were going to be there with Miss Cox today on the stream, what would you have said? Now is your time to shine, buddy. So let us know.
I think I sent him the request. If not, Lev, can you send it to him?
Yes, I send it to him, and by the way, all the people who are watching this, who are just on Twitter and thinking, what is this, how can we know more about whatever this is? This is Break the Rules. It's on YouTube at breaktherules.tv, that's first. Second, you can go to bit.ly/ oh, I see they cut it off a little bit here, BTR Odyssey. That's the full one. So bit.ly/ BTR Odyssey, that is going to bring you to the Odyssey recording of this. It's minus 22 characters. So here, I'm going to have to get rid of some. But anyway, you get the idea. We are on Odyssey, we are on YouTube, and we are currently live streaming this on YouTube and Odyssey right now. So if you go to YouTube, subscribe, add a like, share it with your friends. BTR has to grow, and it is going to grow with your help. So that's all I wanted to say, just to get that out of the way. BreakTheRules.tv, Patreon.com/BreakTheRules. Anyway, let us go to... Yeah, so Oren, I'm not sure what his situation is right now. So let's go.
Catherine's accepted the speaker request. So
there we go.
I'll do a quick chime in, and then I'll return to listening mode. But mode? Is it mode? I don't know. Words don't compute anymore. But I missed, I don't know what you were talking about, but I know you mentioned the truckers. And the one thing that I thought was really interesting with the protest in Canada, we had the truckers protest, we had people in front, I know in different cities and in large numbers, like thousands. There's pretty much almost zero reporting happening. So the media is kind of deciding what is worthy of talking about and what is not, and they don't want to give attention to any of these displays. And and a lot of people that I know seem quite happy about that. However, yeah. So I mean, like, incredibly.
Well, apparently they're funded according to some media. Like, there was this Matt Gurney schizo thread today about how implying they're funded by Russia, and it's going to be like the sixth. And
Well, you know who they're actually funded by? Apparently, the biggest donor is Jagmeet Singh's brother-in-law.
oh no!
Wow, really?
No! For those
Yep.
who don't know, he's the leader of the NDP, which is like the it's like the Bernie Bro party in Canada, but like more for people who don't know who are American. Yeah, Jagmeet Singh, his brother-in-law. That's crazy.
Yeah, his brother-in-law is the #1 funder of the GoFundMe for the trucker protest.
Well, see, futurism is the future. There you go.
Well, very, very interesting indeed. But I will say, I find it just so kind of fascinating what's going on right now in terms of like finding out information about any of these things. And everyone sort of gets conflated too as like being anti-mandate is the same as being an anti-vaxxer. So even if you're like totally vaccinated and pro-vaccine. So it's an interesting time, but I do, the only way to sort of know what's going on around you is like, social media accounts, maybe people's first person accounts. And the idea like that some things should be covered and some should not for the greater good, and sort of the media deciding what that is and what it is not. It's very sort of concerning to me. I'll go back into the audience.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
But also, people are requesting for Kevin Michael Grace to come on BTR. That would be great if we did talk about Canadian politics, although it's kind of like would be boring for most people. But he's like really, people are pointing out is that the Sikhs, they're disproportionately represented in trucking, especially around Ontario, southern Ontario, where I'm from.
Oh.
So
seek and you shall find, as they say.
Oh, it's crazy. A lot of these Sikhs, they come over, they wear cowboy hats and everything. It's
over
amazing.
the turbans, or
no? Yeah, with the turbans, they wear cowboy hats.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh man.
All right. Do we want to jump into the
average? Anyway, yes.
Yeah, let's jump into the base question. I know that we have King Salmonfish waiting. Let's see. Oren says that he did not get the speaker thing. This is really weird. I'm going to try one more time. I think this has got to be the feds, in the Jannies and Facebook.
You were kind of glitching out when you tried to send it, so that could be it.
So here, Oren McIntyre has been invited to speak. Let's see if that should work.
If not, then request Oren, then we'll get you on.
Do you want me to do like a quick little
sure.
intro of like the article?
Go for it. Yeah, talk about your article.
So,
go for it.
Just for anyone who wasn't on the stream, what started this conversation was there was a new website launched a few weeks ago called Based Politics. And it was launched by a pair of libertarian journalists named Brad Polumbo and Hannah Cox. We had Hannah on the stream earlier. She was great. But this kicked off a whole fracas about the idea of what based means and which kind of political community or ideology owns the word based. Based typically being associated with kind of more of the new right space, the nationalist right, the alt-right, whatever you want to call it. Words are arbitrary. But yeah, we're just talking about what based means to you, whether you have to be kind of on the new right, on the nationalist right, whatever, to be based, and whether libertarianism can be based.
So with that, I'm not sure, Oren, if you have the speaking opportunity or not. If it's not there, just request it. I don't know why it is that the Jannies and Twitter or whatever's going on with the system is not letting you speak. It's really, really weird. I don't think I have anything to do with that. I think it may be something in the settings. But let's see, King Salmonfish. Let me try to bring you in here as well. Hold on one second. King Salmonfish, always interesting to hear from the great King Salmonfish. And Oren, once again, let me know what's going on in the settings there. Like request to speak, and let's see if that's gonna work.
Yeah, they're the bottom. There's a mic icon that you can messaged Oren that you could request to speak. So I don't know what's going on here. That's really weird. I don't know. That's never happened before. So there's other people that I don't know, but maybe if you want to take a risk, Lev. I know one of them follows me.
Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take a risk about 30 minutes in. We're going to transition this to Odyssey only. It is very important that we promote the Odyssey channel, which you could find by just typing in bit.ly/BTR Odyssey. That's YSEE. So you guys go there right now, go to the Odyssey. I'm going to bring up the Odyssey chat as well on the screen, so it's both YouTube and Odyssey. But again, if you guys, there are 40 people here. I'm sure not all 40 of you are subscribed to BreakTheRules.tv, so that's got to change right now. So subscribe to BreakTheRules.tv, that's the YouTube channel. Go there. This is simultaneously being streamed on YouTube, Odyssey, and all the other networks as well. We got to reach out everywhere. So, yeah. You know what, Oren? Try this. Oren, try logging out of Twitter, just like close the application and then come back
That's
in.
what I do. I even
Yeah.
refresh my phone. Yeah.
Yeah, see if that works. But King Salmonfish, we haven't heard from
Good
you
advice
yet.
for
So
everyone, honestly.
yes, honestly, yes. It's the it's the equivalent of have you tried plugging it out and plugging it back in. This is the new generation of that, if you will. But King Salmonfish, go for it. Let me know what's on your mind. Oh, there we go. We got Oren. So, all right, let's see. In terms of the right of way, let's go Oren first, then King Salmonfish. So, Oren, go for it, buddy. If Miss Cox was in the room right now and we were talking about the base question with her, what would be some of your thoughts? You are muted right now, Oren.
Oh, Oren, he's there? Okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
All right,
There we
can you
go.
hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, I was trying to boomer tech this up as much as possible. All right.
By the way, Oren has achieved a milestone which few Anons have achieved.
Oh, yeah.
His tweet has been featured on Tucker Carlson Live.
Round of
I can't
applause
believe
for
it.
Oren, honestly.
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, that was pretty surreal. Yeah. But yeah, no, I was listening to the stream on the way back, and I mean, I think it's pretty simple. From what I heard from her when she was talking, it sounded like she wasn't familiar with the term really, or what it was connected to, and just heard some people in libertarian circles using it, and then said, "Okay, well, I'm going to turn this into what I want it to be." I mean, she pretty much said that out loud, right? I'm gonna imbue this with my own kind of ideology and just take the term as I understand it, right? That's what she was saying.
More or less.
More or
I mean,
less, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, there's not really more to say there. I feel like it's pretty straight up. I'm gonna take a term I don't understand, that I'm not familiar with. I hear it's hip with the kids these days.
No, but specifically hip with the kids. I think the thing that I found to be not weird, but just to show that there is a disconnect here, is she equated the term specifically, and I asked her this, with members of the quote-unquote alt-right, even though this term, I mean, just like Pepe the Frog, it's been something that I wouldn't say has spread everywhere. It's been something that's specifically been spread throughout the very online culture of digital, troublemaking, fun-having, youthful people, sometimes youthful at heart. But the idea being is that these would have been whichever young miscreants would have been, you kids get off my property back in the day. This is just the equivalent of that, but in an online sphere. At least that's the way that I see it.
I actually wanted to ask Oren, like, what do you think alt-right means? Is that like even a useful term anymore? I feel like it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, are you traveling back to 2016? I don't, what, it's whatever
Yeah, exactly.
that
Like,
was.
is Jordan Peterson alt-right? Jordan Peterson's like largely a classical liberal. I mean,
yeah, you have to remember that when that term first came out, you had people like Cernovich and Paul Joseph Watson using it, because what they were trying to describe was people who were not part of the mainstream, but could be identified as politically right. People who wanted to be outside of kind of the Bush era version of the right wing, but certainly would land somewhere in, something beyond the conservative circle, but something definitely on the right. And really, that term then kind of died because it got attached to, obviously, the more ethno-nationalist part of whatever that was. Yeah, and so because of that, basically they all had to go back and renounce the term that they had been using, because it got associated with something that they really didn't, I think, initially intend for them to use it with. And so at this point, I don't think even people who would have been, legitimately part of that movement in 2016 even used the term. So it's using extremely dated political language, internet.
Yeah. Also the genealogy, like for example, I know like Spencer, he likes to claim he invented the term, but really the term was invented by Paul Gottfried, and he goes into it in his book Post-Liberalism. And I think the problem is that like you sort of a lot of these figures in the alt-right, they sort of come off as like the county, like the red state county fair nostalgia tour type thing, like when they get together and they have like they still have sizable audiences, but I don't know, I think they've largely have gone off into their own platforms and they've been subject to like vicious deplatforming. Not to say that's right, but there just tends to be a lot of like little different cults of personality. But I do think that quote unquote alt-right ideas have largely diffused into popular discourse among the like what do you want to call it, outer right, dissident right, whatever, like I mean, something awful like rationalists will use like what the outer group or outer party or the blue party, I don't know,
I prefer
the red
new
party.
right, honestly.
Yeah, the new right, I guess, if you were to have like a broader
It's
sort
useful
of
as like a very
fusionist-
blanket term.
Yeah, like I said this, I think I think it was Pill Eater or someone, where I said that this sort of like untenable amalgamation of like neo-pagans and like Christian traditionalists, as we've seen with the last like few weeks, obviously,
Well,
is like sort of like a new fusionism in some like weird, crazy way.
I don't know what you mean by like neo-pagans though. That's just like that's so online. There's like 6 of those people. Like they're not
Well-
they're not a meaningful part of any political coalition. This is just like such a very online
Right.
preoccupation.
I think like certainly like Bronze Age pervert has managed to reach mainstream voices, but I wouldn't consider it like there are people even like who are more like esoterically like adverse to Christianity than him. Like he's very nuanced in his take on Christianity, but I do think that there are the real fusionism that I think is going to be a huge problem in the future is the sort of like techno and people who are like trad Kaczynskiites. That's going to be the real dividing line that's at least been with us since like right accelerationism and neo-reaction.
Wait, Gio, sorry, say that again. Techno what? Techno mum?
Techno-modernists and
modernists.
yeah, like, people that are, it's largely around the issue of nuclear power, but I do think that
nuclear power.
there's sort of like a,
Well, this is what
Yeah,
Catherine.
the
This is
nuclear
what
stuff.
Catherine D, or default friend, always says is like the real culture war is like transhumanists versus non-transhumanists.
yeah, that will probably be.
Speaking of which,
She's great.
we gotta get to Gennady on the show, and maybe she could come in with Gennady. That would be an interesting stream. What do you think? For those who don't
Gennady
know,
needs another. Oh, go ahead.
wait,
God.
you're saying Gennady needs another Sonny? Is that what you were gonna say? They're
Oh,
like the yin and
that
yang
maybe. Who
with
knows?
each other.
Can I star another question?
Go for it.
Go for it.
So on the stream, I was kind of talking about this idea of like the reason there was so much of a backlash to the idea of based. I mean, I know you had that quote tweet of like my culture is not your costume, which was pretty funny. But you had like Sober Mari and Patrick Deneen and everybody just like going off about this. And I think that the reason it touched a nerve, and then you also had like a lot of people just like in the comments just making random like homophobic remarks about Brad and stuff. But like I think the reason that this touched such a nerve is that being based is about like claiming a marginal status. Like being based is about kind of like standing outside the consensus and shaking your fist at it. And for someone who's as a libertarian is part of what is in many ways a dominant ideology, to try to claim that was offensive. Is there, I don't know, like what are your thoughts on that, the idea of like being based as like claiming a marginal identity or like a prophetic speaking truth to power identity? Aaron.
I mean, I think the reaction is pretty clear. Like I said, it feels like a pretty cynical attempt to grab what is a movement you don't understand and appropriate it and take it the direction you want to go, which is literally like I said, what she said it was doing. And it really just comes off. It's like churches trying to do rap videos in the early '90s or something. Like it really has that feel about it. Where
that one fake one was in particular.
Jesus is, well, I'm not going to say it, you know.
Yeah, but yeah, my point being is like it's just it feels false. It feels manufactured. It feels like a cynical attempt to grab a part of a zeitgeist that you weren't involved in, that you don't really have any interest in. It's literally just, you know, finding a piece of someone else's movement on the ground, try to pick it up, dust it off, and see if you can kind of graft it on, you know, for attention. And so I don't know. I mean, obviously, in these kind of spaces, you're going to have an outsider feel, right? For sure. But I think another big, like I said, big part of that backlash, and the reason you saw other people sparking off of it, is I think everybody feels that there's something different coming up on the right. It's moving from the outside edges into something bigger. And everyone, I think rightly, who has any real investment in it feels the need to gatekeep, feels to say, no, like for once, like, you know, you can't just move in and take over. You can't just pick up mainstream support and just, you know, decide that you're now the ones driving this bus. We see a lot of this trying to happen right now. We see a lot of people trying to hold up voices from the center left libertarian space and try to make them the new champions of, you know, resistance to COVID lockdowns or whatever, you know, and hold them up as the people who are suddenly speaking out against it. When you had people who were really taking chances, really getting banned off of platforms, really losing livelihoods, taking risks, and they're just disappeared. And I think people are pretty tired of watching people who are risking nothing trying to co-opt the work of people who actually went out there and did something. And I think this is just, you know, this one thing is not the thing, but it's just an example that I think kind of lit everybody up because they saw that, obviously.
But there's also a question, real quick. I have a question. I have a question for Oren.
That kind of,
sorry. Real quick, I just have a question for Oren. So
then we'll let in more speakers.
Yes.
Can I jump in real quick, Lev?
Sure. Go for it. Okay.
I think this is really kind of emblematic of the uphill struggle that whatever this new thing that's coming up on the right is facing, though. I think it is facing this uphill struggle because for a long time, you know, you had like the Tea Party revolution, right, in 2010, which was, you know, completely astroturfed, but you could count on this support because the policies you were advocating for were benefiting big business, right? You were, you know, your whole thing was like, big government is bad. We're going to cut corporate taxes and cut regulations. And of course you have this just influx of Coke money and money from big corporations. But now, you know, if you're going to say like, hey, the big corporations have gone woke, big tech is woke, you know, all the major cultural institutions in America are against us. Like, you are facing an uphill battle to build a movement based on that, just because, like, where is your money from? And I know that sounds cynical, but, like, you know, somebody has to fund the think tanks, somebody has to fund the fellowships. And if you don't have those, it's like, well, how far is your movement going to get, you know?
So people were accusing the anti-CRT, like in schools, like people were saying like Chris Rufo was getting Coke money or some other type of money. I don't know.
Well, people are looking for
pill there where you really can kind of push back in an authentically populist way.
Yeah, but look, like I think that people have this idea that everything must be perfect, and I'm not saying you guys have this idea, but some people who may bemoan the fact that based or other things have been taken, this is the way of nature. It's an unfortunate thing, but these things.
Yeah, I mean, you can't complain that.
Yeah.
You can't complain based was taken, like it was appropriated by the right from like, you know, drug culture, right?
Yeah, but also not just that, but also we got to look at what are the results here. Because if we do, like, you know me, Gio, I always stand Barry Weiss. But when we have people like Barry and others...
Okay, listen, look,
yes.
Barry Weiss is nothing but a clinger on recently when it was safe for her to come out on Bill Maher, the most mainstream of platforms. Now she talks about, what was it, CRT or some other.
So would you rather?
COVID, yeah.
So would you
Very
rather she?
Yeah.
Okay, but would you rather she did not say anything at all? This is the argument that I don't understand.
She needs to go back and make some pastrami for me, love. That's no, I'm kidding.
This is what I don't get. Like you're looking for perfection. You're looking for perfection from people who we know that they
I
are
feel
going
like I'm
to be
just
in a
saying red
particular.
meat for our audience, Lev.
We know that a lot of people who are in the mainstream, they're going to be stuck in the mainstream. They're not going to be part of this more esoteric group of people. Let them help you. And you could say, well, they're not
Exactly.
helping me, but
I've seen more and more lately, like in the last few weeks, I've seen people say like, I've seen people like on the right try to turn against, Barry Weiss is an example. She's kind of an easy target, but I've seen them like targeting, Jordan Peterson and Rod Dreher and Ben Shapiro, and it's like these people are not your enemies, I mean, Jesus said
I
both.
don't know about Rod Dreher, though.
Jesus said both.
I have to light what
you. So they're both applicable in different situations, and I think that it takes some discernment to decide which is applicable in which situation. But
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, Gio, what's your issue with Rod Dreher? I like Rod Dreher.
I think like the problem with Rod Dreher is that he's ultimately like, apart from like a lot of his sort of like more urbanite type of mannerisms, I think he's just of escapism, which isn't going to like serve most people given like the current climate. But I mean, there are people like I
don't know. Like I think that's kind of like a caricature of the Benedict option, though. Like he's constantly saying like it's not about escapism. It's about like log off and like genuinely build community in your own life and in your own church and in your own family.
Gio, do you think it's the Benedict Arnold option? Is that what you think it is? The Benedict Arnold option?
Well, Benedict Arnold option. Oh, well, I wish. As a British loyalist, no, I'm kidding. I think that is there some deep lore. I want Rod Dreher to come on BTR.
Oh yeah,
because he we had back in the Thermidor magazine days. We had this thing where we would obsessively email Rod Dreher to come and debate our friend Nathan Duffy, who is also a writer for Thermidor. And so imagine if that would materialize like 5 years later. This was back in 2016. If Rod Dreher would come on BTR to debate Nathan Duffy, that would be amazing.
I had dinner with him in New Orleans last year. Great guy.
Oh, man.
So let's get some more people in here.
I thought Rod Dreher was more a fan of brunch, though.
So let's get more people in here.
Let's get salmon fish.
Oh yeah, salmon fish. Did you get a chance to talk about the base question? Go for it. And then
I want to address this before it gets too complex with all the different things people have said. I just want to maybe establish like my basic definition of what based means. And to me, it's almost in every single case that I have seen an embodiment of some kind of virtue. And frankly, in a mass culture where like ethics or virtue of any kind has been subverted and inverted, such that being actually the embodiment of some kind of virtue is often seen as transgressive or countercultural. We just kind of get that rebellious thing with it. But then you talk about like, the Daily Wire and all these people like Barry Weiss, who are basically fair weather patriots. And there's a serious concern with that, which is that you end up with, I think I actually arrived at this conclusion a while ago, but Jonathan Peugeot did a video where he basically equated this archetypally to Judas, which is that they were not fully coherent with the ethic. And so like that's potentially 1,000,000 times more dangerous than like overt enemies, because like when people argue all day for the freedom of speech fundamental position, but then like I was literally censored by a whole bunch of people on the right recently because I've been like secretly shit testing people, and then that kind of thing. You end up with a real problem where it's like you get clingers on towards the end of a thing that's already been developed, and then they try and assert their dominance over it, but do so without actually upholding the virtues of the thing, and so fundamentally cripple and kneecap the entire movement. And then I was speaking to Semiagog yesterday during one of his streams, and he was addressing his concerns regarding Jordan Peterson and how some of these characters get about 75% of the way there, but never fully there. And I literally told him, I just drove down to Nashville to speak to Michaela Peterson to address some of these concerns. regarding truth as the source of power and authority, rightful authority, as well as like status within the real hierarchy, and like the romantic tradition as the inheritance of the West, and how embodying these things actually cures depression, and how it's like the solution to the reproduction crisis and many other of our materially death spiraling problems that lack heart and soul. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
But hold on,
yeah,
King
Peterson-
Samovich,
Oh,
hold
sorry,
on.
can I respond to what?
Hold on. I got to
respond.
respond first real quick. So when
Sure,
you
sure.
were talking about all of these various concepts that they're not talking about, it reminds me of the conversation we had in the stream where I think a lot of these people that you're pointing fingers at, I think they're specialists. And I think we do have an overly specialized world today where you would have a doctor that only knows certain things about how to treat the ears or how to treat the, whatever. But they don't look at it holistically. And I think this is a big problem for a lot of speakers today, for a lot of intellectuals, where they're in their own bubble, they're in their own specific sphere, and it's hard for them to get out of that. So when you have people who focus more on the economy or focus more on classical liberalism, like I said, even though I'm a classic liberalist, I was about to say liberalist, Sargon. Anyway, even though I'm a classic liberal, I don't consider that to be the end point, meaning it's something that would have, I think it would make a better society, but that's not the end of the society. Now that you would have a society where certain things would be, better off for people, both economically and in terms of freedom, now what? And that's the bigger question. That's the question of teleology. What is the end goal for all of us as these experiencers of consciousness? And that is something that I don't think a lot of people, much respect to a lot of these classic liberal economists, libertarians, but they don't focus on that. And I think why a lot of people are attracted to the more based, edgier content out there is that they seem to be one of the few people that, at least for them, give an answer to that. Why are we here? What are we doing? This is why I think somebody like Alex Jones and Joe Rogan have this kind of synergy, especially when they talk about the DMT elves. Like, you'd think that something like that's, out there and crazy, it's just like for the sideshow. I don't. I think that's something that points to, hey, like, what if there are other things out there that are beyond our grasp of comprehension? That is very attractive to people who I think feel like they're in a very materialistic age where people don't really think about what exactly is going on beyond the daily grind, beyond the adverts that they see all the time. It's a breath of fresh air, and that's why I think a lot of this 4chan culture is really attractive. Of course, it has its negatives too, but yeah.
Yeah, Lev.
I'm actually very optimistic. I don't see like there are certain individuals where you said I was like pointing fingers and criticizing, and to some degree that is true, but I'm frankly quite the optimist about like how various levels or different positions or specializations can be beneficial to the overall culture. But part of my problem has been differentiating between those who are fundamentally a detriment and are not actually upholding those virtues and like ethics, because we're in a modern situation of advanced signals warfare and like false status markers, and almost everyone is susceptible to that Milgram experiment, like incredible bias towards perceived authorities. So like we really do have to differentiate, and maybe even just examine the importance of gatekeepers, in the sense of like, are these people fundamentally detrimental, or are they just like a good stepping stone, or just hang out for people that may never want to go further but would ultimately be beneficial to the overall culture. So that's kind of my concern, is that there are people who are fundamentally traitorous and like Judas level archetypally, and like that's highly concerning.
Well, there is,
Sure.
I think, a way we could find that. Oh yeah, go for it. Go for it. Yes.
Okay, yeah. So like I kind of had three things that I was thinking of through all this. Lev, first of all, like psychedelics are super interesting. There's a woman I know, her name's Audrey something, I think. She's a journalist, but she like did a ton of psychedelics and then like converted to Christianity, and like I think she'd be really interesting to have on a discussion about psychedelics. Anyway, Salmon, so I get what you're saying about gatekeeping. I think there is a real value to gatekeeping to a degree. I think that kind of in the mid 20th century, I know it's really fashionable to disparage what's his name, National Review guy,
William F. Buckley.
Yeah, William F. I know it's very fashionable to disparage him today, and like there's certainly valid reasons to do so.
William F.
But
Buckley
I think
Breaker.
he did do a lot to like purge like actual insane anti-Semites from conservatism. So I think there is a role for gatekeeping, and maybe there ought to be some gatekeeping applied to Barry Weiss. I don't know. With Jordan Peterson, I mean, like that guy's out here there like literally saving people's lives. So I'm less accepting of criticism of him, but I really liked what you said. Like,
Yeah, but then NRO.
Sorry, Gio, can I finish my point?
No problem.
Sure. Yeah. So I really liked what you said, Sam and Fish, about the idea of framing based as virtue. Like something is based when it upholds a particular virtue, and that like our society now just doesn't encourage that anymore. So that was something I was kind of thinking about as I was thinking through what based meant. Is like, when I grew up, if it was like, it was expected of me. I was told in my school and in my church and everything that I would wait till marriage to have sex, for example, right? But like when it actually came down to where I was like dating girls and had to be like, no, I don't want to have sex. It was like, it was a punchline, it was a joke. It was cringe. It was like, oh, look at this guy. He's a loser. He's a virgin, whatever. Like, but like, I don't know, if I had the idea of like, no, this is based, right? Like being virtuous is based. Going against like the societal sexual ethic is based. So that's why I said during the stream that like I want based to belong to the people, because I think that there's a lot of kids that grew up like I grew up that could really use that encouragement, and that having that label could give them that.
Interesting. And we have Rubes over here who's been waiting to speak. So, Rubes, what do you think is the definition of based for you?
We also have the Columbus Bugle listening to us. My God.
Everybody subscribe. Subscribe to
Sorry.
I literally woke up from a nap and like joined this space, and the one thing I love about your guys' streams and spaces is how chaotic they are. So this is just really funny to listen to. But I don't honestly, okay, I came across based when I joined like, I don't know, right-wing Twitter. So I feel like this is the only place I've actually heard it in. And then I wanted to like, what does it mean to me? I'm not entirely sure, but I kind of agree with what King Salmonfish here was saying, that I don't know actually who said it, but it was about like how a lot of people use it to respond to somebody who's acting out of virtue, and not virtue like the kind of virtue that liberal atheists would kind of assume, but virtue in more of like the traditional and religious sense. And then Lev brought up the point of how people like Alex Jones are more I don't know, I guess kind of their ideologies are more attractive simply because they talk about meaning, and they address things that actually involve purpose. And one thing that I have noticed is that the reason why a lot of these terms like based and a lot of like the right-wing ideologies are kind of making a comeback is because they're rooted in tradition, and they're rooted in religion. And even if people don't agree with, maybe they don't believe that Jesus is God, or maybe they don't believe the actual detailed religious ideology, I guess
They should.
They still have like this. They still have this attraction to it simply because it does give your life meaning. It does give you purpose. It does give you an understanding of who you are as a human being, or why you're even here. And so I feel like a lot of these things that are now talked about, they're not actually new. They're like ages old ideas that just now resurface because, again, like Lev said, people find them attractive. They give human beings, and they give actually, I guess, people on our side of Twitter even a cause to fight for, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah, I would say it is no coincidence that Jesus was literally an embodiment of virtue, as in he had to be embodied and exist. And this is like an innate, deep reality to the situation. So, for the people who don't want to go fully there, you do get specialization in certain aspects of virtue. And I guess you could argue like a fallen world kind of situation where individuals are more or less ethical or coherent. But my argument is like the Yuri Bezmenov argument that demoralization literally means morals, as in being in line and coherent with reality, such that if you're subverted, you literally cannot functionally act to defend your people. So that's kind of my position. But yeah, Jesus literally embodied. That's important.
And before we go on further, because we have John over here, before we go on further, I want to say, for all the people who are fans of cats, there is a video where I feed my cat Steve a shrimp, and it's a looping video. It's really adorable. And if you guys want to see that video that's playing during this stream, go to breaktherules.tv. Look at where this is streaming, because this is streaming right now on YouTube at breaktherules.tv, and in about 10 minutes or so we're going to be transitioning into the Odyssey portion of it, Odyssey exclusive. The link for that is bit.ly/BTR Odyssey, ODSY, wait, OD, I'm imagining the letters in my head. No, you know what, I'm going to write it down. ODYSEE. So BTR ODYSEE. That is bit.ly link. So go there for the Odyssey stream. But YouTube, breaktherules.tv. And also, if you want to have more of these conversations happen where we bring people together, patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron today. So with that, John, go for it.
All right. Well, it's good to speak to you again, Lev, and you, Gio, as well. I think that based is more or less a sort of object at which one own self is at the center. Like, if you ask a Catholic what is based, it is Catholicism. If you ask a fascist what is based, it's fascism. If you ask a communist what is based, it's communism. And so I do think it has this sort of just kind of relative position, and we can project sort of what we want onto it, but ultimately, I think like any language, like, yeah, it is relative, and it just comes down to yourself. Like, your own position is based.
Yeah, I just completely disagree.
There's something to that, but I think there is also...
I don't agree with that.
I think there's also a sense of marginality to it. I think there's a sense of like, not only is this my position and is it right, but also this position that I hold that is right is, you know, is in the minority and is standing against the dominant ideology.
Yeah, but so has exceptionalism always been throughout history, a fringe position.
Well, Rubes disagrees. So, Rubes, what do you think?
Well, I keep raising my hand. I feel like I'm the only one actually raising my hand, but here's okay.
We're all a bunch of Neanderthals. That's why, Rubes. We're all a bunch of, you know, cretins when it comes to internet etiquette.
Okay. I wanted to say, well, it's kind of like I wouldn't say that it's relative. I would not say that, simply because it's kind of like it's very culturally specific. So like, say that you're standing in a crowd of people, right? Like this, I don't know, this, just imagine that you're standing in a crowd of people and you all have like an inside joke, right? And then all of a sudden, like, a stranger comes up to you and like starts using your inside joke. You're gonna stop reacting when that stranger uses that joke, because like they're not part of it. They're not part of that culture. They're not part of that meme. They're not part of that inside joke. And this has happened to me. I've done this, or like I've encountered people where, you know, they've tried to kind of get into a very specific inside joke and it just doesn't work. So I feel like based is kind of like that, where it very much belongs to a certain group of people. It's very much like predominantly used by a certain group of people, and I think when people outside of it use it, it almost doesn't make sense, because it I don't know, the thing that they're doing is not based. Like, it's almost like we've attached that word to specific actions. So when people outside of those actions, like if somebody says like porn is based, are we going to be like, yeah? Like, no, nobody's going to say that. And I don't think that people outside of this side of Twitter would even like use that term, or like I don't know, if they use it, it wouldn't make sense. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying. I think there is.
Well, can I
sorry,
throw
go ahead.
something
Yeah,
in
go
there
ahead.
really quick? I mean, yeah, I do understand what you're saying. Like, you don't want the word to be adopted by other people who you feel like are going to abuse or misuse it. But I mean, I would ultimately just chalk it up to this and say, can anything be based that you personally disagree with? Like, would you ever look at something that you think, oh, that's wrong, and then at the same time say that that is based? You wouldn't, and that's because it does have a relative position.
Yeah, if I'm wrong, basically.
Yeah, I just think I'm right. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I think there is a sense of marginality to it. I think if you take it back to the original definition of based, that really comes through, where, you know, based is connected to the idea of freebasing, right? Like, it's like if you said someone was based, you know, when the term originated, it meant they were high on crack and acting crazy, right? So it automatically, just by definition, entails this idea of someone who's crazy, erratic, maybe a little bit threatening, doesn't really care how he's being perceived by the people around him. So there is a sense of marginality inherent to it. So I think when you claim to be based, not only are you claiming to be right, as John said, which I think he makes a very good point there, but you are also claiming to be prophetic somehow. You're claiming to be speaking truth to power.
Yeah, but how many people call themselves based? I mean, from what I've seen, it's more of like a comment from others on something that somebody else does.
No, you don't call yourself based. That's cringe.
Yeah, it's kind of yeah.
That's
my kind of argument here is we should definitely consider the language manipulation and like redefining games. Like once something has been kind of concreted mimetically and actually has some value and kind of specific definition, it would probably be of high level importance to not let the relativists just completely destroy it. And just like, oh, it just means whatever you want, man. Like that is not the case, because that's kind of antithetical to the nature of something being based in the first place. So hopefully it's a resistant meme.
Well, no, I think there is something objective to it, which is like, who is actually the prophetic witness in society today? Who's actually speaking truth to power? Like Biden's voting rights speech, I think, like somebody on MSNBC said, like, oh, Biden's really speaking truth to power, and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, Biden literally
Oh,
is
God.
power. He's literally the president. By definition, he cannot speak truth to power. Like, so I think that the reason people got riled up about Cox and Polumbo claiming this title of based is because they were claiming to be marginal, to be speaking truth to power, to be prophetic, when in fact they are the mainstream, they are the dominant ideology. So I think that, you know, to put your mind at ease about like it having an objective definition, its objective definition is connected to that marginality, to that prophetic witness, and whoever is authentically giving that prophetic witness has the best claim to the term based.
I mean, I would even be.
Yeah, but for example, there's like.
Well, my point is like, should it serve its purpose and we act society?
Use the word based, it's like.
Well, I mean, no, I've seen like, you know, socialists and communists use the word based, where it's like, oh, we should, you know, guillotine the bourgeoisie, haha, based, and it's like, I don't necessarily begrudge them the word as I begrudge it the way I begrudge it to like libertarians and neoliberals, because like they, you know, I think that they're wrong, but they do espouse an ideology that is genuinely marginal. I think they miss the side of based that's based as in rooted, based as in grounded, you know, in something older and deeper than we have now. But you know, like I said, I don't begrudge them that term as much as I do the people who genuinely belong to ideologies that are dominant, but that seek to cast themselves as marginal, like progressivism.
By the way, guys, we are going to be transitioning. I just found out, by the way, that the link tree for some reason does not work. So I'm going to get a verification link. It said that it wasn't verified. So anyway, we'll work that out, even if I have to contact the link tree people. But I really appreciate whoever sent that over in the chat. I actually want to shout you out because I definitely appreciate things like that. Okay, I'm going to shout you out a little bit later. Oh, it's Alex Delarge.
Yeah, it was Alex Delarge.
Yes,
yeah.
I'm a big fan of Clockwork Orange, so I really appreciate that. I'm going to get to the bottom of what exactly is going on with the link tree. But anyway, we are going to be transitioning this into the Odyssey portion. So this is not going to be on YouTube anymore. It's going to be on Odyssey, which again, I'm taking a chance here because I really want to get those YouTube subs. So before I transition, everybody who is listening to this, and I mean you, I mean the person who is listening to this right now, who is hearing my beautiful Russian voice coming through with the accent, because I can talk in a Russian accent too. I can speak like this, and I can tell you right now, it is very imperative that you subscribe to BreakTheRules.tv. Go there right now, it is our YouTube channel, and it will make me very happy. It will make me happier than a Russian bear who got a big pot of honey and is licking his gigantic paws with the honey. Anyway, thank you so much. Please be sure to subscribe to BreakTheRules.tv, patreon.com/BreakTheRules. My father is a great artist who makes these wooden magnets, and he will be able to make a beautiful wooden magnet for you if you become a $10 patron. And wait, no, sorry, no. Wait, $10? No, my mistake. Ay, what's going on with me? No, if you become a $5 patron, you are going to get the MP3s of the episodes after they come out. You are going to get Patreon exclusive episodes, and you are also going to get my undying affection. When you become a $20 patron, you are going to get beautiful handcrafted wooden magnets created by my genius father, Alexander Polyakov. And when you become a $30 patron, you are going to get beautiful prints from Giovanni Pennacchietti. Pennacchietti, bella, mwah, mamma mia, cisioso, molto bene, delicioso. And when you become a $50 patron, you are going to get all of the above plus a custom wooden magnet, whatever design you want. Well, within limits, my father is going to make it. And when you become okay, that's enough. No, you're also going to get. It's not enough. You are also going to get. What's going on? You are also going to get the Warhammer 40k figures by Jules Hamilton. You are also going to get another beautiful painting from Geo of the Bob Ross style, and you are also going to get once again our undying love and affection. You are not going to get the undying love and affection for $20 or $30. You're going to get that for $5 and $50. So that gives you somewhere to progress to, so you don't feel like you're contributing enough by being a $20 or $30 patron. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to me talk about this. I am now going to transition from YouTube to Odyssey, and I am going to post the link. It is a bit.ly link to bring you into Odyssey. It is bit.ly/BTRODYSEE. That is the Odyssey link. We are live streaming on Odyssey right now, so I am going to go into my Android emulator here, and I'm going to put that in the description. So there we go. Okay, now it is okay. It's going to stream on Odyssey in 1 second. I just have to go into here and get rid of YouTube. Oh man, I feel so bad because we have 53 people watching. All of you, go to Odyssey right now. Okay, bit.ly/BTR Odyssey. Go there right now. Go there right now. Go there right now. All the YouTube people. Oh, wait. No, I can't do that yet. Here's why. The reason I cannot transition yet, here, I'm going to go back speaking in the Russian accent. The reason why I cannot transition yet is I have to be very, very fast, like Russian wolf. I have to be very fast.
Listen, Lev, we all support you in your transition, all right?
I appreciate that. What I have to do, and this is actually very important, what I have to do is I have to open up another link here on the YouTube channel, because YouTube has been kind enough to actually let the content creators of its channel post the next in line episodes. You know, like you could post trailers, and you could also post the episodes that are coming up next. So that is what I'm going to do here. I forgot to do that, so I'm as quick as I can, going into the settings. I'm going into the edit sphere here, and where it says over here in the bottom, where is it? Customization, redirect, add. Here we go. So the stream that I am adding, this is tomorrow. This is a shout out for tomorrow's stream. It's not actually going to be at 6. I just spoke with James. It's going to be at 7 because Graventus is coming at 8 o'clock. So it's going to be a stream about Christianity, whether Christianity was invented by the Roman elites. It's going to be a hot debate. And we are going to have James Valiant versus Lambda of the Lambda Bible Study. So be sure to check that out. It's at 7 o'clock, not 6, 7. I'm going to correct the date. Don't worry. So anyway, with that being said, is everybody on Odyssey yet? I hope you are. So here we go. I am ending YouTube.